Chapter 1232. Kong Qingming asked someone to drive the car back and report the situation. If they wanted to pass through, they had to get rid of this group of monsters. However, the number of monsters that covered the long road was not small. Moreover, they weren't weak. Kong Qingming controlled the surrounding grass, vines, and branches to bind them, but it was not easy to kill them. The smaller ones were still able to crush their bones, but the bigger ones were able to quickly break free. The monsters that were strangled by Kong Qingming's plants began to squeak and scream. It was very harsh and uncomfortable to listen to. Except for Kong Qingming, the others didn't use their abilities. Instead, they jumped to a higher place, found a place with a better view, and each took out a strange gun. Each of them only had one of these guns, and the bullets were specially made. This was because the bullets contained the liquid of cat peppermint grass. This is a newly developed gun. Although it's not perfect, it should be of some use, right? But at least it should be of some use, right? Lu Jing raised his gun and aimed at the middle of a monster's face from afar and shot. Pooh! Lu Jing's marksmanship was very accurate. Even if the distance was more than 200 meters, he could still hit the target. Gee! When his bullet hit the middle of the flower head, the monster immediately let out an ear-piercing scream. Then its body stiffened and it fell down. However, they didn't die just like that. It wasn't until the liquid in the bullet was injected into its body that it suddenly exploded. Bang! The monster's body immediately exploded into pieces. Hey, the effect is not bad. Lu Jing cheered excitedly. He heard that when doing experiments, even if a grenade was thrown into the mouth of these things, it would become a dud. According to observation, this was the self-protection of the energy in their body. When a bomb was thrown into their mouth, they could sense danger, and their body would automatically make a conditioned reflex, using the energy in their body to extinguish the bomb before it exploded. Needless to say, when the bullet was shot into their mouth, they would spit it out. However, the newly developed guns in Haicheng would inject the liquid into the body of these monsters the moment the bullet hit the target. This would cause their body to enter a state of paralysis. Then, after the liquid in the bullet was completely injected, the small bomb in the bullet would explode. In fact, these guns were semi-finished products that had just been hastily researched. They were meant to be used by the people who were going out this time. There weren't many of them, only a dozen or so. After the flower head monster's body exploded, the surrounding monsters suddenly scattered away from the spot, as if they were avoiding its flesh and blood. Although Kong Qingming could control a large number of vines, he could not kill many monsters. It also consumed a lot of his own energy. After thinking about it, he simply used his ability to tie those things up and then took out the same gun as Lu Jing and the others and began to shoot at the monsters that were wrapped up by him. Every shot and every bullet landed in the mouths of those monsters. Squeak! The monsters that were hit by him and the others exploded. Although the other monsters avoided the corpses of their dead companions, they still kept rushing toward Kong Qingming and the others. Huang Shou drove back and reported into his communicator as he drove. Reporting, there's a group of unknown monsters blocking the road 5 kilometers ahead. There are at least 1,000 of them squeezed together. I won't be able to pass for a while. Xiao Liqing parked the car aside and asked, "What kind of monsters are they?" Their heads are like flowers and their bodies are flat. Their limbs are very short and they have no tail. Their bodies are about 1.2 meters wide and more than 1.8 to 3 meters long. They don't look like land monsters. Huang Shou replied. These groups of creatures had flower heads, and they didn't look like they belonged to the continent at first glance. Moreover, their bodies were so big. They should be the monsters that the bosses often talked about recently. After Xiao Liqing ended the conversation with Huang Shou, he turned back and reported the situation to Wu Qingyue. There is a group of underground creatures blocking the road 5 kilometers ahead. It will take some time to clear them. Do we need to take a detour? It meant that there were a lot of those things. If they wanted to go over, they had to eliminate them all. It would be more troublesome because the defense of those things was very tricky. Wu Qingyue asked him, "How long will it take to go around here?" Xiao Liqing looked at the map and said, "If the road is clear, it will take an hour. If there are obstacles, it will take about 2 hours." In the apocalypse, there would be abandoned zombie cars blocking the roads of all sizes. Therefore, other than the roads that the people in the base used and the roads that had been cleared, the roads in other places were mostly blocked by obstacles. Wu Qingyue looked at Wu Yueling and said, "Call Qing Ming and the others back." It meant that they were going to take a detour. Xiao Liqing nodded and then said to Huang Shou, "Call your boss back. We will take a detour." Huang Shou responded and turned the car around. Xiao Liqing said curiously, "They should be using the guns that they brought out this time. I don't know how effective they are." Wu Qingyue smiled calmly and said, "We will know when we come back later." Xiao Liqing said, "It's a few kilometers away. I don't know how fast these underground monsters are. If we take a detour and they still follow us, it won't be fun." Wu Qingyue said, "If that's the case, then I will make a move to wipe them out." Xiao Liqing looked back at him speechlessly and said, "Then what's the point of taking a detour? Why don't you just go and wipe them all out?" Wu Qingyue glanced at him with a smile and said, "I don't want to take Lingling to see those things. From your description just now, I think they are very ugly. What if we scare Lingling? If he didn't take care of Lingling himself, how could he be at ease?" Other than himself, the highest level among the people here was Xiao Liqing and Kong Qingming, who were at level 6. It wasn't safe for them to take care of her. When Wu Yueling heard him mention her name, she turned her head and looked at her papa. She thought about the monster that they were talking about just now. Although she didn't understand it very well, her instincts made her very afraid. But she didn't show it to Wu Qingyue. She just continued to hold the rabbit and stroke its fur. After a while, Kong Qingming and the others came back. "How is the effect of the new gun?" Xiao Liqing asked Kong Qingming through the communicator while reversing the car and preparing to take a detour. "Not bad. It didn't take more than 3 seconds to shoot until it exploded. It's just that the range is a little short. It's useless to hit it from 300 meters away." Kong Qingming's voice was heard. "Are you sure this is the kind of thing that came out of the ground?" Xiao Liqing asked again. "Yes, because even if we wipe them out, we won't be able to pass. The road ahead is broken and there are cracks. The car can't pass, so we can only take a detour," Kong Qingming said. "It seems that we can only take a detour." Xiao Liqing sighed. Chapter 12:33. 300 meters is already the biggest improvement. Beyond 300 meters, the impact force isn't enough. There's no way to inject the liquid from the bullet. Xiao Liqing could only reply after hearing Kong Qingming's complaint. Then he continued, "And do you know how troublesome it is to make this new type of bullet? What right do you have to complain?" Kong Qingming said helplessly, "Okay, 300 meters it is. Although it's not far, it's not close either." After their car retreated, the monsters were following the smell from afar. However, their speed wasn't fast, and these monsters didn't have eyes. They had been using the tongue that stuck out of their mouth to sense the breath in the air. Fortunately, the car's speed was faster than their speed, and soon Wu Qingyue and the others left the monsters' sensing range. They had no choice but to stop. They continued to probe with their tongues that were like ropes. On the other side of Qingshan base, Lan Lu looked at the report in his hand and frowned. On the other side of the table, Chang Qingqing and Hu Daba also looked very serious. "Do you think Xikong Chen is really willing to share his research information with us? He's not that kind of person." Chang Qingqing put down the information in her hand, sighed, and looked up at Lan Lu worriedly. "Even if we don't look at his, we can look at other people's. I don't know what Xikong Chen is planning, but it's definitely not a good thing." Lan Lu answered her expressionlessly. "I don't know if Wu Qingyue and Lu Tianyu have moved. Since they are going, it seems that they have their own plans." Chang Qingqing said, "After all, if they could think of it, it was impossible for those two not to have thought of it. I hope after you come up with a solution, these things won't move." Chang Qingqing said worriedly. Now they had discovered other creatures that had emerged from the ground. Apart from the disgusting multi-eyed monster that the female zombie leader had mentioned before she left, they had also discovered other strange creatures in other places. Because of the large number of these monsters, the originally deserted land in the Western Territory had worsened. There were fewer and fewer plants, and the area of desertification and drought was increasing. The air quality had deteriorated in a large area, and many places couldn't go without wearing masks. I wonder when the leader will wake up. Thinking about Dong Xiaowei, who was still unconscious, Chang Qingqing felt even more worried. Don't worry, he'll be fine. I heard that the Universal Base and Sea City are both researching a drug that can suppress this kind of madness. If it really doesn't work, let's look for them. Lan Lu said. We don't have much food left, but the situation of the land hasn't changed much. What will we do then? Do you still want to exchange food with China? Chang Qingqing suddenly remembered that there was less than half a year's worth of food in her base. Right now, only the Huaxia base had food. It was said that they did have soil-less cultivation technology, so they might not lack food like the other bases. However, Chang Qingqing knew that it wasn't easy to do business in China. Not only would they demand an exorbitant price, but they would also make some unreasonable demands. This last point was the most troubling. If he was not careful, he would be trapped by them. Why must we trade with them? We can also trade with Sea City. Lan Lu didn't care much about this issue. Chang Qingqing looked at him and asked doubtfully, High City? Is it too far? This isn't the main problem. The problem is, do they have new food? From the intelligence, High City doesn't have soil-less cultivation technology. Even if they do, it's not as developed as Huaxia. High City's population isn't small. Even if they can cultivate their own food, it might not be enough for them, right? Will they trade with us? Although Green Mountain Base didn't have many people, if High City was also lacking food, they definitely wouldn't want to trade with them. Moreover, it was too far from Green Mountain Base to High City. The road was so dangerous. The further it was, the more dangerous it would be for their lives. Don't worry. Is Wu Qingyue the kind of person who would cut off his own path of retreat? If he didn't have some trump cards, why would he split with Huaxia? I think he isn't worried about food. I'll go and ask him when the time comes. Lan Lu only smiled, but his thoughts were clearer than Chang Qingqing's. Then he continued, in order for everyone not to starve to death, it's better to run further than to be plotted against by Sikong Chen. Roar, Hudaba, who had been sitting silently, suddenly spoke, agreeing with Lan Lu's idea. Then why don't we change to another base? If we run around like this, we might as well change to a location closer to High City and Huaxia. After all, the environment here in the West won't last for more than a few years. It will only get more and more difficult in the future. Chang Qingqing thought for a while before suggesting. Lan Lu was taken aback. He turned to look at Hudaba. Daba, what do you think? In fact, Lan Lu had long wanted to change locations. After all, this wasn't an environment that humans could live in for a long time. It was just that he didn't have time to mention it before a bunch of things came up. After hearing Chang Qingqing's words, Hudaba also fell into deep thought. Hearing Lan Lu ask him, he looked up at the two of them. Roar, I don't have any objections. Since we're moving, let's move earlier. Lan Lu smiled. Okay, since you've agreed. Then I'll go look around this time and make a decision when I find a suitable location. Both of them nodded without any objections to his words. Then I have to get ready to set off. This time, let Xiao Yezi go with me. Lei Qing will stay here. Seeing that the two of them nodded, Lan Lu immediately clapped and smiled. On the other side, in addition to Wu Qingyue, Lin Xiao and the others also encountered a group of strange things after a few hours of walking. Before they arrived, Lin Xiao and Xiao Tingting had already sensed it. Mama, guess what kind of monster it will be this time? Will it be a bug? Xiao Tingting's eyes flashed with curiosity and anticipation. It was a novelty to see the monsters that had been appearing recently. Anyway, it won't be good looking. After seeing it in the past, it was as ugly as it could be. This time, other than being ugly, there was nothing else he could do. Lin Xiao silently thought in her heart. Moreover, she hadn't encountered this kind of aura when she came back before. It seemed to be a new type. Why are there all kinds of things? Can't they all be of the same type? That way, it wouldn't be so troublesome to study. Chapter 12:34. Just as Lin Xiao and Ting Ting were guessing the number of things in front of them, a red shadow flashed past them like a meteor. Hey, that guy ran to the front? Ting Ting exclaimed in surprise. He stretched his head to the window and looked outside with his round eyes. It was as if he could really see what was going on. Lin Xiao was also confused. It was quietly following behind us. Why is it running to the front now? Duan Wan, who was driving, couldn't help but say, "Why is this strange cat different from the other monsters? They come out in groups. Once they come out, they destroy the environment and attack other creatures. Why is there only one of it? Could it be that this is a rare species?" Hearing her words, Lin Xiao felt that it was possible. A rare breed? It's really different from the others. Also, its personality is very strange. It seems that it only affected the environment when it just came out of the ground. Now, its movements have no effect on the plants. Especially when it ate fruits. It didn't eat meat? Well, why did it always send meat to her? Could it be because it saw that she had caught many mutated beasts and knew what she needed? It couldn't be so smart, right? But why does it want to follow you? From the last time at the base's wall, she had already confirmed that this strange cat's target was Lin Xiao, because it would only react when she appeared. How would I know? Lin Xiao replied curiously. Then he looked down at his son. "Baby, do you know?" Little Tingting rolled his eyes at her angrily. "I follow you. The reason is because of you. You don't even know. How can I know?" "It's fine if it follows you. But why is the Tibetan Mastiff following you?" Duan Wan asked in confusion. Lin Xiao thought for a moment. "Who knows if the Tibetan Mastiff is following me? It didn't do anything to me. Maybe it's following you." At this moment, they could vaguely hear the roars of wild beasts. Roar, roar. Lin Xiao, Ting Teng, and Duan Wan immediately turned to look. Ting Teng blinked his eyes and looked forward. "Can you see that far with those big eyes?" Lin Xiao saw his little expression and reached out to pinch his little face. The child had already grown up for more than a month. His face was round, and his eyes were full of spirit. Her small nose and mouth were exquisite, and her face was rosy. His body temperature was half that of a normal baby, and his heart rate was very slow. But it did not affect his vitality and healthy appearance at all. He had short legs and chubby arms, but the skin on his knees was a little rough, probably because he had been climbing too much recently. Little Tingting's face hurt from her pinching. He raised his little hand and slapped her hand away. Then he ignored her and stared out the windshield. As she looked at him, she said, "I can rely on my intuition. My intuition is very powerful. If you don't believe me, just wait and see. That big red cat will definitely help us settle the front." Lin Xiao looked at him strangely. "How do you know that it will help us clear the front? Even if it runs to the front, it might not be able to chase away all of them, right?" This big cat was only level 7. Although the aura in front was faintly discernible, there were a lot of them. And its strength was not low. Logically, those things would not be afraid of it. It was just a level 7 mutated beast. After all, from the aura coming from ahead, there was also a level 7 aura. Little Ting Ting raised his chin and said proudly, "I just said intuition. I won't be wrong." Lin Xiao looked at him speechlessly. "You have this ability? Isn't it the same ability as your Aunt Wenwen?" Little Ting Ting shook his head. "No, my ability hasn't awakened yet, Mama. Even if it awakens, it will be a natural type, not a special type like Aunt. My intuition is a kind of vague feeling, and I can only feel it when I'm close." Lin Xiao smiled at him, and then looked at his proud little expression. Her heart softened. She couldn't help but hug him and put her mouth close to his, kissing his chubby little face. "Okay, then I will wait for a while. It's time to verify it. Let's see if what you said is true." Little Teng Teng immediately wiped his face with his little hands. "Why do you leave saliva on my face every time you kiss me?" Lin Xiao looked down at him innocently. "No, there's no saliva. It's just a psychological effect. How can you be so obsessed with cleanliness at such a young age?" "Ha!" Little Teng Teng was a little angry and made a face at her. "No!" Duan Wan looked back at the mother and son and said, "Although Wenwen's second ability is very special, Little Teng is not ordinary either. Our Little Teng is also a very special little baby." "That's right, Aunt Duan is very understanding. Mama, you actually don't believe me." Little Teng Teng then climbed to the empty seat next to him and sat down. At this time, their car was getting closer and closer to the aura, and when it was far away from the danger zone, Lin Xiao asked everyone to get out and put the car into the space. Then she carried little Teng Teng to find a higher hill nearby and jumped up. The others followed behind her. Soon, they found a few trees on the hill and jumped up, looking at the situation in front of them. Roar, roar. They saw a huge red cat pouncing on a group of creatures that looked like rats, but every time it killed one, it would spit the corpse in its mouth to the side. Little Teng Teng was right. What are these? Rats? They don't look like it, they're also hairless. Are they rats? Duan Wan stood on another branch of the same tree as Lin Xiao and said in surprise. At this time, the group of rats was hairless and brown in color. They had a pair of big round ears, a sharp mouth and a pointed nose. They were about the size of an adult pig and looked like a type of rat. Other than the sharp mouth and big round ears, these strange rats had no hair on their bodies. Their two front claws were a little big and were very developed. Their hind claws were relatively small and their tails were very short. There weren't many of them, less than 1/10,000th of the group that Lin Xiao saw at the zoo. There were probably only a few thousand of them here. However, under the interference of the huge cat, they looked very frightened and fled in all directions. Only a huge level 7 rat that was slightly smaller than the huge cat surrounded the huge cat and tried to attack it from time to time. However, it was noticed by the huge cat every time, and it would turn around and use its claws to scratch the rat. At this time, the huge rat's body was full of wounds. Roar. When the huge cat turned around and wanted to pounce on it, the huge rat would instantly burrow into the ground. The huge cat seemed to be a little unwilling to go underground, so it turned around and chased after other strange rats. Lin Xiao looked at little Teng Teng and was a little speechless. So this is a cat chasing a rat? All right, you win. She felt her face was a little painful. Chapter 12:35. Lin Xiao didn't expect the new underground creatures to be a group of rats. As expected, even the underground food chain was the same. The level 7 mouse was completely defenseless against the claws of the huge cat that was twice its size. It could only crawl into the ground with its tail between its legs. It had a strong aura, but it met its nemesis. With the appearance of the huge cat, the rats scattered in all directions. It seemed like Lin Xiao and the others didn't need to do anything. They could easily pass through. Maybe it was because the huge cat was playing with the huge rat's claws, but it was enraged. After burrowing into the ground for a while, it suddenly came out from in front of the red cat's face. It jumped up and pounced towards the red cat's face with its claws. Roar. Slap. The red cat merely bared its teeth in disdain and squinted its huge red eyes. It squinted its huge red eyes and easily swatted the rat down. Roar. The weird rat let out a strange roar as it was slapped to the ground and quickly rolled around. After rolling on the ground, the strange rat immediately adjusted its posture. It faced the red cat and prostrated itself on the ground, fiercely baring its sharp teeth at it. It didn't have two protruding teeth like normal rats. Instead, it had a mouth full of sharp teeth. Roar, roar, roar. However, the red cat didn't care about it and swung its tail. When the strange rat saw it swinging its tail over, it immediately dodged. The surrounding rats either ran away or burrowed into the ground. They made a few holes on the road surface, but the cars could still pass. Lin Xiao and the zombies watched the cat play with the rats for a while. Then, the rats were chased away. The red cat killed many of them, but it couldn't catch the level 7 rat. Although the rat couldn't beat it, it was still very good at escaping. Roar. Finally, the red cat saw that the area had been cleared. It dug out the heads of a few high-level rats. After digging out a few energy cores, it ate them and jumped into the air before disappearing, leaving behind a ground full of corpses. Look, there shouldn't be any problems if we directly go over. Little Teng Teng hugged Lin Xiao's neck and said. Lin Xiao stood on a tree branch and leaned against the tree trunk while hugging him. He nodded and said, "Indeed, there's nothing for us to do. Let's go." With that said, she jumped down and quickly appeared on the road. He casually took out the car. At the same time, she collected a few gophers' bodies and threw them into the woods in the space. They could be used for experiments. After they got in the car, they continued to drive towards Huaxia. However, little Teng Teng's intuition was surprisingly accurate. He wondered if it was always so accurate. Since your intuition is so accurate, can you sense Auntie Wenwen's condition? Lin Xiao couldn't help but ask him. Teng Teng sat on the sofa and said, I've told you many times about Auntie Wenwen. She will come back. I'm not nervous at all. It's just that I can't tell Uncle Yuan's condition. At the mention of Yuan Tianxing, little Teng Teng revealed a somewhat distressed expression. Lin Xiao looked at him and asked nervously, what about him? If he could find uninfected catnip grass, it might help his condition. But where could he find it now? Don't you feel anything? Not even a sense of foreboding? Little Teng Teng's face was lowered in thought. When he heard Lin Xiao's question, he lifted his head to look at her. No, I don't feel anything. I don't feel bad and I don't feel good. But there's a subtle connection, and it's with Auntie Wenwen. Maybe we'll find out when she comes back. Lin Xiao looked pensive. Is that so? Looks like Wenwen's the key. Little Teng Teng continued to look at her. Don't worry, Auntie Wenwen will level up and come back. Once she's back, she might know how to save Uncle Yuan. Her second discipline is very strong. Lin Xiao nodded in agreement. That's true. Her clairvoyance is at level 2. Does that mean it's more accurate? Or maybe it'll be easier to trigger it. As the car drew closer to Huaxia's base, Skyfire's forces were making their way there. On the road, however, it wasn't as convenient as Lin Xiao's group. As they passed through the city, they were surrounded by zombies. Once they were out in the suburbs, they were attacked by mutant beasts and plants. Worse, they ran into hordes of underground creatures and bugs. Half of them were dead before they even reached Huaxia's base. There was also a small group that was ostracized and had no choice but to go to Haicheng. If they tried to go to China, they'd be at the mercy of Skyfire's people. Perhaps they would be killed before they could even reach Huaxia. Their only choice was to go to Haicheng. Along the way, they suffered heavy losses. Why are there so many of these monsters? Did they come out of the ground again? Why do they keep coming out of the ground? If this goes on, even China won't be able to hold out. Do you think we'll be able to avoid them in Haicheng? But where else can we go if not to Hai City? If we go to China and those bastards find us, we'll be killed. These monsters come in hordes, even the base won't be able to stop them. Even if we go to Haicheng, we won't be able to avoid them. If they break through the walls, do you think humanity has any hope of surviving? I don't know, we'll just have to take it one step at a time. At least we'll have food in Haicheng. With Wu Qingyue here, we'll be able to live another day. He's an 8th level talent, he'll be able to deal with these things. That's right. With an 8th level adept around, it won't be easy for those things to attack the base. In these people's hearts, at least Wu Qingyue, who was a level 8 expert, was their hope. Other than China, their only option was Haicheng. Back in China, Xikong Chen slowly received reports of the representatives from the other bases. He stared at Wu Qingyue for a while. Then he turned to Xie Longyun, who was standing by the window. Are you sure you can handle him? If you fail, you know the consequences. Xie Longyun was dressed in a tight military uniform, with a mink fur cape draped over her shoulders. Her legs were bare, unafraid of the cold. On her feet were long boots that reached her knees. She leaned against the window, lazily turning her head to look at Xikong Chen. Don't worry, he won't fail. Doesn't Wu Qingyue care about that woman? If he did, he'd take the bait. As long as you don't screw up on your side, it'll be fine. Can you really restrain that woman? She has a dimensional space, and it's an active one. Xikong Chen confidently said, Don't worry, I've checked. Her dimensional space isn't mobile. She'll have to come out from wherever she enters. I'll make sure she can't come out after entering her dimensional space. Xie Longyun shrugged. It'd be best if your plan succeeds. Otherwise, it won't be my responsibility if it affects my side. Chapter 12:36. Wu Qingyue isn't that easy to fool. Do as you see fit. Xie Longyun's words made Xikong Chen frown. After warning her, he didn't say anything else. Xie Longyun curled her sexy red lips and smiled faintly. No matter how smart a man is, he will panic in front of the woman he loves. Unless he's not sincere. Sikongchen looked at her doubtfully. How do you know he's sincere? What if that woman isn't that important in his heart? Xie Longyun raised her eyebrows and smiled confidently. From what I know of him, if he's not sincere, he wouldn't spend an entire year on her. Trust me. Sikongchen looked at her silently and didn't say anything. At this time, Xie Longyun asked him again, then how are you going to restrain that woman? I don't think she's a simple person. Not long ago, we were going to rob her prey. She's definitely on guard against you. Sikongchen said expressionlessly, so what? When she's in our territory, I have plenty of ways to deal with her. Didn't we recently receive a drug that can restrict and strengthen superpowers? Even I tried it. I don't believe she can avoid it. Xie Longyun slightly frowned and said, I know you have this drug, but how are you going to use it on her? Don't tell me it's mixed with her food or water. It's too hard to get close to her without being suspicious. Who said I'm going to let her eat it? She doesn't need to eat it. She just needs to smell it. Sikongchen suddenly sneered and looked down at the document in his hand. His expression faintly flashed with a hint of gloominess. When Xie Longyun heard this, her expression immediately froze. She looked at him with slight surprise. You can even smell it? Is your drug that powerful? That's why I said I tried it. Sikongchen expressionlessly raised his head and glanced at her. Xie Longyun raised her eyebrows again and looked at him. You tried it too? Is the effect very obvious? You're a level 8 superpower user. How can you be defeated by this kind of drug? Sikongchen tilted his head and said with a tone of excitement as if he had obtained a treasure, I spent a lot of money to exchange for this medicine. It's not something that can be casually exchanged with them. Also, I've already asked someone to study its composition. Unfortunately, our country lacks a few of the special ingredients needed. If we want to continue obtaining this kind of medicine, we have to continue to cooperate with them. Xie Longyun, oh, it looks like you paid a huge price to get this potion, right? But since they can develop drugs of this level, it seems that their development is much faster than ours. But since you've got the drug, why didn't you just kill that woman? Sikongchen continued to look down at the document. I will. However, this drug can only be used at special times. The effect of the potion was not very strong, and it only lasted for 5 seconds when facing a level 8 Arcanist. Moreover, this could only restrict her abilities for a short period of time, but not restrict her movements. If nothing unexpected happened, she would not be able to escape death. But I can't guarantee that she doesn't have any other means to save her life. But at least this has restricted her, and it should be enough for you to continue with your plan. Xie Longyun nodded. Suddenly, she said, since you have such a good thing in your hands, why don't you give me some so I can use it on Wu Chengyue? Wouldn't that be easier? Sikongchen sighed and leaned back in his chair. He looked at her and said, if I had more, I would definitely give it to you. The problem is that I only got 2. They wouldn't give me more. I've already given 1 to the research institute, so there's only 1 left. There's very little, so I can't give it to you. Xie Longyun curled her lips in dissatisfaction and complained, why didn't you think of a way to get more? Sikongchen said, I wanted to, but they didn't produce a lot. That's why they aren't willing to give me more. Okay then, we'll act according to plan. I'll go back first. Xie Longyun said one last sentence, turned around, and left. The next day, Lin Xiao was dozens of kilometers away from China, but he still hadn't reached the base in China. He sensed the aura of Wu Chengyue and others coming from afar. Papa is coming. Little Teng Teng also sensed Wu Chenyue's aura from afar, and then he was a little excited, wearing thick clothes, and looked out of the window like a little bear. Lin Xiao smiled faintly, pinched his face, and said, why are you so excited? It hasn't been many days since we parted, right? Because Papa is here, I don't have to eat bad porridge anymore. I want to eat the porridge cooked by Papa. Little Teng Teng glanced at Lin Xiao with some contempt, and he clearly despised her cooking skills, which couldn't kill people, but the taste could kill people. In fact, he had already been used to Wu Chenyue's cooking skills, and his appetite had been raised. I think your appetite has been raised. How can the porridge I cook be so bad? Lin Xiao looked at him and said, unwilling to be outdone. You make porridge with the same taste every day, and I will be tired of it, okay? Little Teng Teng curled his lips, and he was very disgusted. Indeed, Lin Xiao's cooking skills were not as bad as he said, but from morning to night, he made the same kind of porridge every day, and the taste was the same. Lin Xiao was used to eating the delicious baby porridge that Wu Qingyue cooked for him, and it was his limit to endure it for so many days, okay? It was simply torture. Lin Xiao was speechless. He already had a bad appetite at such a young age. How could she feed him in the future? Then you have to get used to my cooking skills, because you can't be with that guy every day. Otherwise, when you are with me in the future, what will you do? After thinking about it, she felt that she had to change the child's appetite a little. Hearing her words, little Teng Teng found that it seemed to be true. He could only stare at her in silence, but in the end, he still wanted to be a little better for his stomach, so he said, Then can you make a few more kinds of porridge for me to eat? It's very boring to eat the same kind every day, okay? Lin Xiao smiled. I will try my best, just wait. For some reason, when little Teng Teng saw her smile, he suddenly had a bad premonition. When Lin Xiao and the others returned to the base from China, little Teng Teng finally understood what it meant to have terrible cooking skills. After being forced to spend a lot of time to train from a kitchen killer to someone who could barely cook normally, how could he make delicious new dishes in a short period of time? And little Teng Teng, who was forced to taste dishes every day, regretted it, but he had no medicine to eat because his stomach was very strong. He was not afraid of anything, but his tongue was a little cruel. Chapter 12:37. Wu Qingyue and the others saw Lin Xiao park the car on the side of the road. She was sitting on the roof of a car with Tengting in her arms, while the others and zombies were also sitting quietly on the roofs on both sides of Lin Xiao's car. You even brought Lingling here. What were you thinking? Seeing Lingling running toward them, Lin Xiao put Teng on the roof of the car and jumped down. She bent down to pick up Wu Yueling, who was rushing over, and then turned around to put her and Ting together. I didn't expect you to be here. I can put the children in the space. Wu Qingyue walked over to Lin Xiao with a smile and said to her. Lin Xiao turned around and picked up the two little ones from the roof, one on the left and one on the right. Then the three of them flashed and disappeared. After a night's work, Lu Tianyi finally divided the meat. When he finally finished soaking the decomposed meat and internal organs, the others couldn't wait to eat the meat of the first one. But the first one was the baby tiger's big mouse. Although it was big, it was only enough for itself. The other three had a big appetite, but it was not enough to fill the gap between their teeth. Fortunately, except for Wang who wanted to secretly eat a piece, the other two didn't want to snatch the baby tiger's food. Instead, they waited patiently for their own share. Ow ow ow. Seeing that Wang had stretched its neck to the side of its soaked meat, the baby tiger immediately rushed over and roared at it. If it dared to put its mouth into its bucket, it would give it a slap. Wang smelled the fragrance of the meat in the bucket and looked at the fierce expression on Wang's small face. It couldn't help but lick its mouth. After licking the saliva off, it reluctantly turned around to smell the meat that Dahe had caught. As a result, Dahe slapped its dog face with its tail, warning it not to stare at other people's food and drool. However, Wang was not afraid of being beaten. If this one didn't work, it would go to the other one. Then it would smell its own meat and smell other people's meat when they weren't paying attention. Every time, the baby tiger would growl at it with its eyes wide open. Seeing that Lin Xiao put Wu Yueling and Tengting into the space, Lu Tianyi knew that Wu Qingyue had arrived. It seems that we are arriving at the Huaxia base soon? Lu Tianyi didn't feel tired after finishing his work. Instead, he felt relieved. Then he sat on the sofa in the living room with the two little ones and watched them chase the big fat rabbit. The big rabbit hadn't been back to the space for a long time. Feeling that it was back, it was jumping around in the living room excitedly. Seeing it running, Wu Yueling wanted to catch it. Although this fat rabbit was very fat now, it was still very agile when it ran. Soon, Xiao Si, Old Mengua, and the other zombies were all brought in by Lin Xiao. Little one, Lin Xiao said. Yueling of the Qiao, smiled and said while he was, "Ciao." And he immediately smiled, bent over and stroked his mustache as he spoke. Other than Xiao Si and Gizergua, who dared to casually enter Lin Xiao's private building, LV Feng and the rest of the zombies didn't dare to enter, so they stood outside, sat down, or wandered around in the vegetable field. Lu Tianyi wasn't familiar with the old man, but seeing that he was familiar with him, he smiled politely. He smiled politely and said, "It's my honor to be able to help her." Mo Yen and the female zombie didn't enter Lin Xiao's space. They didn't plan to go with Lin Xiao. That was why he disappeared on the way. Lin Xiao put away the two cars and drove towards Huaxia with Wu Qingyue and the others. According to Xiedong's information, the Blue Land was about to arrive. The leaders of the Meng clan and the Black Dragon base had already arrived. When they arrived at the gate of the Huaxia base, the gate was already open to welcome them. Wei Haichao was the one to welcome them. This was supposed to be Hou Guizhong's job, but he was still unconscious after being attacked by the Blue Land. So Wei Haichao could only take over his job and come out to welcome them. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." Leader Lu and Leader Wu seemed to have had a smooth journey. Wei Haichao stood in the middle of the road. When he saw Lin Xiao's car stop, he smiled and greeted them as if they were old friends. He was telling the truth to Lin Xiao since they had met not long ago in the northwest area. Lin Xiao smiled faintly. "Yeah, I don't know if Deputy Leader Ho's condition has improved." Leader Lan was quite merciless. "I'm really worried that Deputy Leader Ho won't be able to wake up." Although she was joking, she was secretly mocking them for overestimating themselves and trying to get what they shouldn't have. This was the result. Hou Guizhong had always been Xikong Chen's right-hand man. As the deputy leader, he had to do a lot of things for Xikong Chen. Now, his outcome was equivalent to cutting off one of Xikong Chen's arms in the open. And this was the result of Xikong Chen's own doing. The smile on Wei Haichao's face froze slightly, but he still maintained his expression and didn't let it change. "I believe that our doctors will quickly solve this situation. Thank you for your concern, Leader Lu." After being stabbed by Lin Xiao's secret words, he couldn't just silently endure and not fight back. So, he stabbed Lin Xiao again. Because in Lin Xiao's base, not to mention doctors with strong medical skills, other technical personnel were very lacking. At least in Wei Haichao's eyes, Universal Base was dependent on Haicheng Base for survival. However, Lin Xiao didn't react to his stab. She smiled calmly. "Is that so? Then it seems that my worry was unnecessary. I will wait for Deputy Leader Ho's good news." "Okay, now that we're done with the pleasantries, shouldn't you invite us in?" "Of course, please." Wei Haichao was no match for Lin Xiao in terms of momentum, and his words didn't cause any real reaction from her. So although he smiled and gestured for Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue to come in, he was a little depressed by Lin Xiao's words. But when he saw Lin Xiao's calm expression, he sneered in his heart. This woman's facial expression was quite deep. Sure enough, after a few interactions, she was not someone to be trifled with. Previously, when she was only level 7, she dared to unscrupulously cripple the hand of a level 7 director in front of the base's leaders. Now that she was level 8, her strength was close to Xikong Chen's. He didn't dare to imagine what she would do if he provoked her again. Chapter 12:38. When Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue arrived in Huaxia, Lin Wenwen was receiving the last batch of goods 7 years ago. Because they were ready to set out for the sea. After putting the last batch of things into her space, the inventory in her space was already full, although the money was borrowed from Dong Lijia several times. It didn't affect the goods she wanted to collect. "Have you finished? Can we go now?" Dong Lijia could now tell the difference between Dong Xinxin and Lin Wenwen when they were sober. Lin Wenwen was counting goods in her exclusive warehouse. Boxes were stacked on the ground. When Dong Lijia came over to have a look, he was subtly embarrassed. Because the labels on the boxes were Hushabou, Sophie, Koheas, ABC, 7 Realms, Flower King, Danbai's, Cotton Age, Free, Motherwort, Xiaoni, and so on. He silently turned his head to look elsewhere, and then said a little unnaturally, "Ahem, we'll set out in the early hours of tonight." Remember to get ready before we set out. After that, he quickly turned around and slipped away. Oh, I see. Don't worry, I'll be ready before dark. Lin Wenwen was busy counting the goods, so she just replied casually. But when she saw that he suddenly ran away, she turned her head and glanced at him. Then she looked back and saw that the labels were all kinds of sanitary towels for day and night use. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. After she finished collecting the goods, she returned to the Dong family's mansion. She saw Dong Lijia still sitting on the sofa in the living room, looking around with dull eyes. He seemed to miss this place. Lin Wenwen stopped and asked him, "Didn't you warn Deng Chunfei and Luo Yuanjun? Aren't they your best buddies?" Hearing her voice, Dong Lijia turned to look at her and said, "Xin said that they have their own situation. Except for the last few years, their situation in the first few years is not so good. So she wants to help them after we completely stabilize our own affairs. Anyway, they won't die in the next 2 years, right? If we change their situation now, it may have unexpected changes to their lives in the future. What if it turns out to be something bad? Forget it." Lin Wenwen looked at him quietly and suddenly said, "Although what Xin said makes sense, have you ever thought that when Dong Xin and I came back here, the trajectory of your lives changed?" This was direct, but there was also an indirect effect, which was to cause the trajectory of others to deviate. As long as it's related to you, there will always be a butterfly effect. Unknowingly, the return of the two of them had quietly changed the situation of those who were related to Dong Xin. This change might be what Dong Xin had expected, but it was also unstable. Hearing her words, Dong Lijia's expression suddenly froze. Then he looked at her seriously. "What do you mean?" Lin Wenwen looked at him and suddenly said, "Forget it, you won't understand even if I tell you. But even if you don't go looking for them, they will come looking for you soon. Like I said, their lives have changed because of me and Dong Xin. They won't continue to develop according to the previous trajectory." Before, Dong Xin said that he didn't want to care about those who could survive the first doomsday and wanted them to develop according to the original trajectory. But she had never thought that her appearance had changed the trajectory of those who had been in contact with her. Dong Lijia's expression suddenly sank. They had never thought of what Lin Wenwen said. Because before, they only focused on themselves and their families to create better living conditions after the doomsday. Everyone focused on resources and facing the desperate environment and crisis of the doomsday. Even if they thought of their friends, and Dong Xin felt that they wouldn't die last time, they certainly wouldn't die this time. Before he could say anything, the guard's report came from outside the door. It said that the young master of the Luo family and the young master of the Deng family had come. Lin Wenwen spread out her hands. "You see, with the life that Dong Xin has experienced before, Deng Chunfei and Luo Yuanjun shouldn't come to your house at this time. But now they are here. And if you don't explain it clearly today, I guess they won't let you go." After saying that, she smiled, turned around, and walked upstairs. Dong Lijia looked at her petite back view, which was much thinner than she was 2 months ago, as she walked up. Then there came the sound of a sports car outside the door, and then the sound of brakes came. "Dong Jia, what happened to your family? Why did you buy all the shares of the Dong's group?" Before he arrived, Luo Yuanjuan's voice had already rushed in from outside the door. "And you also bought your own small company? Has the Dong clan gone mad? What happened? I only went abroad for a month and I heard this news. Are you trying to scare me to death?" Luo Yuanjun rushed in and asked a series of questions to Dong Lijia, who had just stood up from the sofa. Deng Chunfei, who followed him in, did not say anything, but he stared at Dong Lijia in confusion, just as Luo Yuanjun did. He had been busy recently and did not pay much attention to the news, but Luo Yuanjun suddenly called him. The chairman of the Dong's group had been changed. Not only had the shares been transferred, but the Dong family had also sold a lot of real estate in the fastest way. He was so scared that he immediately went online to check the news. Then he saw that all kinds of news media were reporting the sudden change of the chairman of the Dong's group. So far, no one knew the reason. Many people wanted to inquire about the Dong family and see if they could get any inside information by getting close to them. However, the Dong family had not only thrown away the group and many real estate, but also hid in the Dong family's mansion. And the number of bodyguards in the mansion had not only increased, but they were also all masters. The media reporters could not find any loopholes to get information. So now all the major news media and insiders were guessing that there must be some big changes in the Dong family. After reading all kinds of news, the two of them rushed here without even making a phone call. It was such a big thing, but it took them more than a month to find out. And when they were with Dong Lijia, he did not reveal anything about it at all. As best friends who grew up together, why did he hide such a big thing from them? Why on earth did he do that? Therefore, the two of them rushed here to catch the person and wanted to get to the bottom of it. Dong Lijia looked at their imposing manner and knew that if he didn't give them a satisfactory explanation today, these two brothers wouldn't let it go. Chapter 1239. Dong Lijia looked at Luo Yuanjun and Deng Qinfei. Then he looked at them and said hesitantly, "If I tell you, will you really believe me?" Luo Yuanjun and Deng Qinfei looked at each other and said, "Of course we will believe you. I'd like to know what made you give away such a large board of directors group. Don't tell me you've been blackmailed by someone with something on you? Or is there some serious problem with your company that caused you to be emptied? Otherwise, why did you sell all the shares that belong to your family? Don't tell me that the company is going to collapse." Deng Qinfei looked around and suddenly his eyes flashed. "All the valuable things in your house are gone? What's going on? Are you going to run away?" He looked around and found that the valuable works of art, antiques, and decorations in the living room of this mansion were all gone. There were some tables, chairs, sofas, and tea tables in the living room, but all the valuable decorations were gone. The whole living room suddenly felt empty. Hearing Deng Qinfei's words, Luo Yuanjun was slightly stunned, and then he turned his attention to the surrounding environment. What he saw shocked him yet again. "No way! Are you going to run away? What kind of crisis made you sell all the shares of the group and all the things in your house? Is it possible that your mistress is also?" Dong Lijia sighed and raised his hand to stop him from thinking further. "It's not what you think. But my mistress has indeed been sold." Luo Yuanjuan's eyes widened and he said in disbelief, "It's not what I think? If it's not like that, how could you sell your beloved supercar? Even if you are short of money, you can tell us. Although our financial strength may not be able to make up for the losses of your Dong's group, we will give you as much as we can. Even if we can't give you too much, we can help you. Wasn't this the time when brothers could be put to good use? Or do you think that we will only follow you to eat, drink, and have fun?" Deng Qinfei also nodded seriously, although he didn't say anything. But his behavior indicated that he had the same idea as Luo Yuanjun. Looking at Luo Yuanjuan's agitated look, Dong Lijia hurriedly put his arm around the back of his neck and said, "I told you it's not what you think, but the situation may be more serious than you think. Oh no, you definitely can't imagine it." Hearing his words, Luo Yuanjun frowned. Then he closed his eyes and pointed at him, asking doubtfully, "Tell me what's going on." Dong Lijia looked at him, then at Deng Qinfei. Then he let go of Luo Yuanjun and sat down on the sofa. He waved at the two of them. "Qinfei, do you remember the question I asked you at the beach?" Deng Qinfei was taken aback. He looked at him in a daze. "When we were at the seaside, the question you asked?" Luo Yuanjun and Dong Lijia both looked at him. Before Dong Lijia could say anything, Luo Yuanjun, who was impatient, spoke first. "He asked you questions? What problem? Was it the 2 days we spent at the seaside? Is there any special problem?" Deng Qinfei thought for a moment. Did Dong Lijia ask him questions at the seaside more than a month ago? His memory was not bad. He tried hard to think and suddenly remembered that Dong Lijia asked him a question when they were walking on the beach. His eyes flashed. He looked at Dong Lijia and said firmly, "Is it the question you said was a joke?" Dong Lijia nodded and smiled guiltily. "If I say it will come true, will you think I'm crazy?" As soon as he finished speaking, Deng Qinfei looked at him with an expression that said, "Is there something wrong with your head? What? Why you two talking in riddles? Qinfei, what question did he ask you at that time?" Luo Yuanjun saw that he did not know what they were talking about, so he hurriedly urged Deng Qinfei to explain. Then he saw Luo Yuanjun looking at Dong Lijia as if he was a lunatic, which made him even more curious. His heart felt like it was being hung up, which made him want to scratch his heart and lungs. Oh, he said that he asked me what I would do if the end of the world came one day. Then he said it was a joke. He even hypothesized what I would do if the end of the world came. Then I asked him what kind of end of the world it was. Would it be a volcano eruption or a landslide? Or maybe it's a tsunami or a natural disaster. Deng Chunfei couldn't finish his sentence. What? The end of the world? What the hell? Luo Yuanjun was confused. He could not figure out why Dong Lijia would ask such a question at that time. But in the next second, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He abruptly turned his head and glared at Dong Lijia. You can't be thinking of saying that everything you're doing now is to prove that the question you asked Chunfei is true, right? Dong Lijia nodded helplessly when he saw Luo Yuanjun's expression and Deng Chunfei's expression. Is there something wrong with your brain? Luo Yuanjun did not look at Dong Lijia like Deng Chunfei did. He blurted out the question directly. He stared at Dong Lijia's face so hard that his eyeballs almost popped out. Dong Lijia spread his hands and said, "See? I told you that you wouldn't believe me, but you still wanted me to say it. Now you say that I'm out of my mind. I also think I'm out of my mind." After saying that, he sighed in melancholy and leaned against the back of the sofa. Then he said, "When my sister comes down, you will know who's out of it." "Don't talk about me. Why are you talking about me?" At this time, a clear voice came down from the stairs. The three of them turned around and saw a petite and cute girl walking down with a cold face. Although she looked calm, they were speechless because of what she had just said. However, the meaning of her words did not cause any reaction from the three of them. Instead, Luo Yuanjun and Deng Chunfei widened their eyes as if they had seen a ghost. Dong Xinxin. Are you Dong Xinxin? Luo Yuanjun jumped up and looked at Dong Xinxin in disbelief. Dong Xinxin had lost more than 30 kilograms. Not only had she become slim, but her breasts were big, her waist was thin, and her legs were straight, but a little short. Her originally round face was still round, but that was because her face was round to begin with. However, the flesh on her face had obviously decreased a lot. She looked delicate and cute. Because she was not tall enough, she looked like a little girl. At the same time, if it were not for her breasts and buttocks, people would think that she was a 13-year-old girl. Luo Yuanjun was stunned, and so was Deng Chunfei. Because in their impression, Dong Xinxin had always been round and fleshy. Seeing them staring at her in disbelief, Dong Xinxin's face suddenly turned cold. In an instant, she flew down the stairs, rushed to Luo Yuanjun, grabbed his hand in an instant, turned around and bent forward. She stomped hard on the ground with her round buttocks at the same time. Ah, bang! Luo Yuanjun flew out of the tea table. Chapter 1240. Bam. Luo Yuanjun was thrown over his shoulder onto the ground in front of the coffee table. Deng Chunfei, Dong Lijia, Luo Yuanjun, who fell to the ground, was dumbfounded. However, that was not the end. Dong Xinxin strode up to Luo Yuanjun, clenched his fist, and swung it at Luo Yuanjun, who had just sat up. Wait, why did you hit me again? Luo Yuanjun, who had just sat up, felt his vision blur, and one of his eyes was punched. He immediately covered his injured eye and screamed. Then he looked at Dong Xinxin as if he had seen a ghost. Xinxin? Dong Lijia finally realized that this person seemed to be his sister. But why did Xinxin want to hit Luo Yuanjun whenever he saw him? Dong Xinxin stood up after punching him. Then he turned to Dong Lijia and said, "If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have come back dead." Then he glanced at Luo Yuanjun, snorted, turned around, and sat down on the sofa. What? Because of this guy? Dong Lijia's expression changed when he heard that. He immediately rolled up his sleeves and walked toward Luo Yuanjun. He looked like he was going to beat Luo Yuanjun up. Hey wait, Dong Jia, what are you doing? Dong Xinxin, what did you mean? Why did you hit me again? What did I do to offend you? Seeing that Dong Lijia was walking toward him angrily, Luo Yuanjun quickly got up. He continued to cover his eye with one hand and reached out to stop Dong Lijia with the other. Then he shouted at the brother and sister with confusion and anger. You don't believe what my brother said, do you? Then wait for another half a month. Don't blame us for not reminding you. Do you think I work so hard just to lose weight? Ha! Dong Xinshin laughed at them with a face full of disdain. Wait a minute. What does what your brother said have anything to do with you hitting me now? Wait, do you believe what he said just now? What do you mean by coming back dead? I'm a little confused now. I don't understand what's going on. Chen Fei, have you figured it out? Luo Yuanjun stared at the brother and sister with one of his eyes in a daze. In the end, he looked at Deng Chenfei with hesitation. The silent Deng Chenfei looked at him expressionlessly, then at Dong Xinshin, and then at Dong Lijia. He narrowed his eyes, stared at Dong Xinshin, and said, What can prove that what you said is true? Do you think it's just because you sold your family property and lost weight? Dong Xinshin shrugged and said, Believe it or not, it's up to you. Didn't I tell you? Let's wait for half a month. Come on, tell me what this guy did before you came back. Seeing that Luo Yuanjun was on guard against him, Dong Lijia had to give up beating him up for now. He then asked Dong Xinshin about the situation. Oh, I'll go save him. Then he refused to go back to the base alone. In the end, I died and he died too. Not only did I waste so much effort, but I also lost myself in the process. Dong Xinshin glared at Luo Yuanjun angrily when she thought of the scene at that time. Luo Yuanjun didn't know what she was talking about at all. He looked confused and asked, What the hell? Dong Lijia, however, had a different reaction. Well, why did you let him go first? Didn't you go to save him? Then why didn't you two go together? Dong Xinshin looked at Dong Lijia and said, I lost a leg at that time. If he took me with him in that kind of environment, neither of us would have a good ending. So I asked him to give up on me. I didn't want to waste my life to save his. In the end, he wasted the life that I spent all my superpower to save him. We died together. How dare you waste the chance to live that my sister exchanged for your life? Stop right there and I'll beat you to death. Dong Lijia was furious when he heard that and felt the resentment in her words. What the hell are you talking about? I don't understand a word. Luo Yuanjun immediately stepped back to avoid Dong Lijia, who was about to rush over. Dong Lijia rolled up her sleeves again and was about to beat Luo Yuanjun up again, but she stopped after 2 steps and said with a hesitant look, Hey, no. If he really left you and ran away in that situation, I would really beat him to death. Dong Xinshin. Brother, whose side are you on? Deng Chenfei, who was ignored again, couldn't help but say, You haven't answered my question yet. Dong Lijia turned to look at him and said, Haven't I already answered you? What I'm going to say is the same as what Xinshin said. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. Anyway, since we are brothers, I'll tell you even if I'm regarded as a psychopath. You can find us in High City in half a month. As for the group, you don't have to worry about it. My brother is right. Since you don't believe us, you don't have to worry about what we do. You don't have to worry about what we do. Anyway, with our relationship, we don't need to lie to you. But Luo Yuanjun, if it's true, then remember, you owe me your life. Dong Xinshin's handsome face was serious, and he didn't look like he was joking. And when she looked at Luo Yuanjun, there was a kind of anger in her eyes. Luo Yuanjun looked into her eyes, and his momentum was completely suppressed. He almost believed what she said, but his reason told him that it was impossible. But Dong Xinshin's punch just now was not light. It was very painful. It's because I know you won't believe me, so I didn't say anything. Don't worry. Even if more than half of the people in the world die in half a month, you will still be alive. Remember to find us in High City. Dong Lijia sighed and then turned to look at Dong Xinshin. What? You sound like it's true. Do you think I don't know what the hell the end of the world is? And Dong Xinshin, you really dared to hit me. Luo Yuanjun looked at Dong Lijia in confusion, and then looked at Deng Chenfei. Finally, he looked at Dong Xinshin angrily. Dong Lijia went back to the sofa and sat down. He looked at him with a gloating smile and said, I told you that you would be beaten by Xinshin. It's you who didn't believe it. She has a bad temper now. Deng Chunfei turned his head to look around, and then looked at Dong Xinxin. Suddenly he said, "So, Dong Xinxin has been acting strange recently, and you sold your family property because of the joke you said before? If that's the case, what do you need so much money for? Isn't it useless now?" Dong Lijia saw his expression and found that he seemed to have believed it. He said to him, "Didn't you give me the answer yourself? I asked you at that time." Deng Chunfei thought for a moment. At that time, Dong Lijia said that the end of the world would be full of viruses and zombies. His answer was food and water. Car gasoline. Chapter 1241. Thinking of the answer he gave before, Deng Chunfei looked at Dong Lijia with a slightly surprised expression. He finally asked doubtfully, "Could it be that what you said is true? Then how did you know? It's not time yet, is it? Did they have the ability to foresee things?" Dong Lijia pointed at Dong Xinxin. "Oh, she said so. Don't you think she has changed a lot? Come on, let me show you." As he spoke, he stood up and casually pulled his sister up as well. Dong Xinxin wasn't able to connect to him and didn't know what he was going to do. She was pulled to an empty place in the middle of the living room. Then she saw him standing in front of her, ready to attack. Only then did she realize what her brother meant by letting them experience it. "Are you serious?" Dong Xinxin asked Dong Lijia. Dong Lijia nodded. "Yes, I'm serious." The other two looked at the brother and sister in confusion. Were they going to fight? At this moment, Dong Xinxin suddenly moved. In the blink of an eye, he moved forward, squatted down, and kicked out. When Dong Lijia jumped back, he suddenly chased after him and punched Dong Lijia in the stomach at a speed that couldn't be seen. "Humph!" Dong Lijia snorted. He had reacted very fast, but he was not fast enough, so he was punched. But Dong Xinxin wasn't done yet. After punching Dong Lijia in the stomach, a foot kicked toward him. But this time, Dong Lijia reacted in time and narrowly avoided her front kick. At the same time, while avoiding Dong Xinxin's kick, Dong Lijia quickly punched at Dong Xinxin. But Dong Xinxin moved his head in time and dodged his attack. Moreover, Dong Xinxin raised his elbow and hit the joint in the middle of his arm. Their sparring moves were relatively simple, but the two of them were very fast when it came to real combat. In the eyes of Luo Yuanjun and Deng Chunfei was fine. He could see the trajectory of their attacks. Luo Yuanjun was confused again. He stared at Dong Lijia and saw that Dong Xinxin kept forcing Dong Lijia to lose. Moreover, their movements were accompanied by the sound of the wind. Their eyes were very serious and their auras were very powerful. Looking at Dong Xinxin's agile and ruthless movements, he was completely dumbfounded. Was this still the fat ball Dong Xinxin he knew, the one who wouldn't hit him no matter how he called her fat? He had known Dong Xinxin for more than 10 years, but he had never known that Dong Xinxin could fight. Moreover, looking at the fight between the two of them, there were still moves and styles. "Chunfei, did you see anything?" As for the tricks here, he could only ask Deng Chunfei, who was an expert in fighting. The more Deng Chunfei read, the more serious his expression became. "Puff, though." At this time, Dong Lijia's block was a step too late. As a result, he was punched in the nose by Dong Xinxin. The pain immediately caused his eyes to tear up and he cried out in pain. I don't want to fight anymore. It hurts." Dong Lijia immediately covered his nose and retreated 3 meters away from Dong Xinxin in the blink of an eye. He looked at Dong Xinxin with tears in his eyes and shouted. Dong Xinxin shrugged at him and said, "You said it was for real." "It hurts. Even if it's for real, you are too cruel. Your brother's nose is going to be crooked." Dong Lijia closed his eyes and said to her with a painful expression. Deng Chunfei didn't answer Luo Yuanjuan's words. He narrowed his eyes and suddenly walked over to stand in front of Dong Xinxin. He slightly leaned his body to one side and got ready to attack. "Let me do it." "Wow, you are not serious, are you?" Hearing his words, Luo Yuanjun couldn't help but stare at him again when he saw that he was 1.9 meters tall in front of Dong Xinxin, who was only 1.5 meters tall. Oh, and he still covered his other eye. Covering his nose, Dong Lijia slipped to Luo Yuanjuan's side and said grumpily, Why don't you do it? You haven't even gone up yet, and you've already been beaten twice. Don't your eyes hurt? Luo Yuanjun. Dong Xinxin slightly raised her head and looked at Deng Chunfei, who was standing in front of her. Although he was full of momentum, she was not weak either. She nodded indifferently and said, "Sure." But as she said that, her momentum changed a little. She looked at Deng Chunfei with a little vigilance. Although her own combat skills were trained when fighting zombies, Deng Chunfei's strength was much stronger than Dong Lijia's. Looking at the tall Deng Chunfei, Dong Xinxin was not afraid at all. She stared at his eyes and asked, "Do you want me to do it or you?" "You first." Seeing that the other party was small and was a girl, he gave up. Deng Chunfei certainly wouldn't make the first move, so he could only choose to defend. Dong Xinxin didn't stand on ceremony. She suddenly bent her leg and rushed forward, jumping up and began to attack. Although her fist was small, its speed and momentum were not small at all. In an instant, she bounced above Deng Chunfei and punched him in the face. Deng Chunfei immediately crossed his hands and raised them to block her fist. However, a tremendous force came from the place where her fist made contact, causing both of his forearms to feel a bit numb after a wave of intense pain. His feet also slightly took a step back. Then, without waiting for him to think, Dong Xinxin had already flipped in the air and kicked him in the neck. This action of turning the body in the air and kicking was not something an ordinary person could do. Not only did it depend on the body's agility and reaction, but it also required many times of training. Moreover, Dong Xinxin's movements were flexible and smooth, without a trace of panic. From the wind and speed of her kick, Deng Chunfei was shocked. At the same time, he reflexively raised his hand and clenched his fist to block his ear. Pooh! Only a muffled sound could be heard when the flesh collided, but the hand that Deng Chunfei raised to block Dong Xinxin's whistling kick was kicked askew by her with great force. Fortunately, his head dodged in advance, otherwise he would have been kicked in the head. Whether it was Dong Xinxin's fist or the sweeping kick, the strength was very strong. It was not the strength that an ordinary girl should have. It could even be said that it was stronger than a man. After being blocked by him, Dong Xinxin nimbly flipped back and landed firmly on the ground with both feet. Just as she was about to rush over to attack the next wave, Deng Chunfei suddenly took a step back in advance and blocked with both hands. He shouted, "Stop." "Okay, I got it." Dong Xinxin stopped her movements. Deng Chunfei had almost seen the level of Dong Xinxin's skills with those two moves. Although he knew that it might not be accurate, and Dong Xinxin might be more powerful. But from her movements, speed, strength, and even the way she attacked, he had already seen something. This was not something that could be learned in a short period of 3 months. So why? He directly looked at Dong Xinxin and asked. Chapter 1242. Although Dong Xinxin fought with Dong Lijia and exchanged 2 moves with Deng Chunfei, he was not panting or sweating at all. She turned back to the sofa and sat down, saying, "Didn't you just ask us why we knew in advance?" "Because I was reborn from 7 years later. I died once. And it was because of him." Then she pointed to Luo Yuanjun, who was not feeling well. What did you mean by dying once? What do you mean reborn? You came back from 7 years later. Are you out of your mind, fatball?" Luo Yuanjun came to his senses after being pointed at by her. He was even more incredulous when he heard her words. "If it weren't for the past 7 years, where do you think I learned these things? Why do you think I became thin? Also, if you call me fatball again, I will blacken your other eye. I'm not fat anymore. Why don't you try?" Dong Xinxin glared at Luo Yuanjun and said. Deng Chunfei had been skeptical before, but now he was 80% convinced. He frowned slightly on his expressionless face, which was rare. His handsome face fell into a contemplative expression. He walked back to his seat and sat down. Finally, he looked at Dong Xinxin. "So what do you mean that you died with him? So you have 7 more years of experience and memories?" Dong Xinxin nodded. "Yes, my superpower is very special. So I came back." Brother." Just as she said that, she suddenly closed her eyes, frowned and raised her hand to touch her forehead. She seemed to be very uncomfortable. Luo Yuanjun and Deng Chunfei were slightly shocked to see her like this, But Dong Lijia nodded calmly. Well, I see. After he finished speaking, Dong Xinshin suddenly leaned back on the sofa and lay motionless. What happened to her? Luo Yuanjun put down his hand that was covering his eye, blinked his eye uncomfortably, and looked at Dong Xinshin and asked in confusion. Deng Chunfei looked at Dong Lijia. Dong Lijia said calmly, "Oh, nothing. It's normal. She just changes people every day." Change people? Deng Chunfei squinted and looked at him in confusion. Yeah, what do you mean? Luo Yuanjun also looked at Dong Lijia in confusion and then turned to look at Dong Xinshin. At this time, Dong Xinshin's eyes moved and slowly opened. Then, he sat up and couldn't help but laugh when he saw Dong Lijia's nose. Xinshin is much more ruthless than me. After saying that, she raised one hand and clenched it into a fist. He then continued, but this time after the fight, I can hold on longer than before. Dong Lijia nodded in agreement. Yes, it's indeed a little long. Deng Chunfei and Luo Yuanjun, who had just received a large amount of information, were confused again when they heard the conversation between the two of them. This was because Dong Xinshin's aura had suddenly changed, and his words were also strange. Say my own name? It seemed like he was talking about someone else. She said it very naturally, but those who heard it felt very awkward. Also, the way Dong Lijia talked to her had changed. It was as if he was talking to someone else. Of course, the one who woke up at this time was not Dong Xinshin, but Lin Wenwen. She immediately stood up, looked at Dong Lijia and said, "Well, I'll go upstairs first." When she was about to walk upstairs, she suddenly felt dizzy when she glanced at Deng Chunfei. A picture suddenly appeared in her mind. 1. Seeing that Lin Wenwen suddenly staggered as if she was about to fall, Dong Lijia was startled and immediately stood up. However, Lin Wenwen just felt dizzy for a moment and didn't fall. But she didn't continue to walk forward. Instead, she squinted and sat back down. At the same time, she raised her hand to Dong Lijia. "I'm fine. Don't worry about me." She closed her eyes and focused on the picture in her mind. It was Deng Chunfei, but there were other people besides him. Other people who shouldn't have been around him. The scene was not static, but there was movement. Deng Chunfei was talking to someone. This is what we saw. It was too dangerous at that time, so we couldn't get close. I'm sorry. As Deng Chunfei said that, a guilty expression appeared on his cold face. And standing in front of him was none other than the person that Lin Wenwen was familiar with, her big brother, Lin Feng. Lin Feng's expression was very agitated. He slapped his hands on both sides of Deng Chunfei and stared at him with reddened eyes, saying, "Are they really still alive?" You're not wrong. You don't have to apologize to me. I just want to know if they were really alive when you last saw them." Deng Chunfei nodded in the picture and said, but when she reached here, Lin Wenwen couldn't hear his voice and the picture quickly dissipated. Lin Wenwen suddenly opened her eyes and turned her head to stare at Deng Chunfei. She wanted to know what was going on with the picture of Deng Chunfei and Lin Feng, and what they were talking about. But now, when she looked at Deng Chunfei again, her mind was still empty. How could this be? What did Deng Chunfei see in the picture? Why was her brother so nervous and agitated? What happened this time? What? Are you okay? Dong Lijia looked at her in confusion and saw that she was staring at Deng Chunfei as if something was wrong. Deng Chunfei and Luo Yuanjun were confused by Lin Wenwen's expression, and now they heard Dong Lijia call her Wen instead of Xinshin. The two of them were even more confused and looked like they didn't have enough brains to process it. I'm okay. Lin Wenwen stared at Deng Chunfei for a while and looked away in disappointment after making sure that there were no more pictures. Wait a minute. Damn it. What are you two playing at? Luo Yuanjun didn't have enough brains to process it, so he just asked them directly. Oh, she's not Xinshin. Let me introduce her to you. She's Wen. She's the other, soul in Xinshin's body. Her full name is unknown, her identity is unknown, and her age is unknown. Oh, she seems to be 1 year older than me? She's also a girl who came back with Xinshin 7 years later. Dong Lijia finally introduced her to them. As for Lin Wenwen's age, if he went back to 7 years ago, he would be 21 years old. So she was 1 year older than Dong Lijia, who was only 20 years old now. Oh, I'm going crazy. What's wrong with this world? Why do I feel like everything I've seen and heard today is an illusion? Luo Yuanjun looked at the ceiling with a defeated expression. He had already given up on thinking about everything the siblings said. Deng Chenfei looked at Dong Lijia expressionlessly and said, "Apocalypse, rebirth, 7 years of memories, and now a soul transfer? It seems like your sister is really a fantasy." Even someone as cold as him couldn't help but complain. Chapter 1243. I'm not feeling well. I'm going back to my room. Lin Wenwen stood up from the sofa and walked upstairs. Are you okay? Is there something wrong with Xinxin's body? Dong Lijia also stood up and looked at her worriedly. But he was more worried about whether there was something wrong with Dong Xinxin's identity. It's okay. Your sister is in good health. It's my problem. When I leave her, this situation won't happen again. Lin Wenwen took a deep breath and answered him with a frown. What she cared about now was the scene of Deng Chenfei and Lin Feng. She didn't know what happened to her brother, and it was related to Deng Chenfei. Since it was something that would happen in the future, Deng Chenfei and Dong Lijia should be able to live. Although she only heard a few words of their conversation, there was a lot of information. What did Deng Chenfei see? He also said that it was too dangerous to get close and showed a guilty expression to Lin Feng. It seemed that he had encountered something, but it was too late. Lin Feng asked about them and still alive in excitement. These two seemed to be important, but Lin Wenwen didn't know who he was referring to. The people he was worried about seemed to have encountered a life-threatening crisis. That was why Lin Feng was so excited to ask if he was still alive. Lin Wenwen seemed to be deep in thought, as if he was thinking about something important as he walked away. Dong Lijia withdrew his gaze and sat down to look at the other two. What else do you want to ask next? Just tell us. If you don't, we'll leave tonight. Luo Yuanjun asked in confusion when he heard that they were going to leave. To High City, Dong Lijia said. Luo Yuanjun and Deng Chenfei looked at each other. They felt that they had to go back and digest what had happened today. Should they believe it or not? But it shouldn't be possible, right? What if it was true if they didn't believe it? They would definitely regret it. Since you said that there was a virus infection, it should have started in one area, right? How could the whole world suddenly be infected? The skeptical Deng Chenfei tried to believe what they said, but he had to figure out the reason first. In his eyes, since Dong Lijia said that zombies were everywhere like in Resident Evil, then the infection should take some time to spread, right? Oh, they said that this virus didn't leak out from some research lab. Instead, it's the gas that overflows from the ground and mixes with the air, causing it to mutate into a virus that can mutate the organisms on the ground. Dong Lijia didn't know the situation at that time, so he could only repeat what Dong Xinxin and Lin Wenwen said to them. From underground? What does that mean? Wasn't this man-made? Naturally formed? Deng Chenfei looked at him and was slightly stunned. It was somewhat different from what he had imagined. It's not man-made. If it was man-made, how could the entire Earth fall into an apocalypse overnight? Dong Lijia waved his hand at him. Luo Yuanjun looked at Dong Lijia and then at Deng Chenfei. After a long silence, he finally couldn't help but say, "A natural disaster? How did it form? Really?" Dong Lijia glared at him impatiently. "It's up to you to believe it or not. If you don't believe it, then forget it. I'm too lazy to say it. Since you don't believe it, why do you care how the virus formed?" Luo Yuanjun looked at him with a troubled expression and said, "But who would believe such a thing? It's not realistic at all, okay?" He also wanted to believe it. Why didn't you tell him a more normal way of doomsday? Suddenly, the gas that came out of the ground turned into a virus. What the hell? If there was such gas underground, then the geologists in the Institute of Geology would have found it long ago. Then tell me, why did Dong Xinxin suddenly become like this in such a short time? I believe my sister wouldn't lie to me, and she wouldn't joke about this kind of thing. Dong Lijia was a little annoyed when he saw that Luo Yuanjun refused to believe what he said. His tone was a little stiff. Deng Chenfei suddenly stood up and said to Dong Lijia, "I'll go back and think about it." He wasn't sure now. Even if he wanted to believe Dong Lijia, there were still some questions in his mind that he hadn't figured out. He couldn't make a judgment until he figured it out. With that, he walked out of the door. Seeing Deng Chunfei leave, Luo Yuanjun looked at Dong Lijia hesitantly. Then he said, "Then I'll go back and think about it. There are still more than 10 days left, right? I'll make some preparations. Let's see if it's really like what you said in half a month." Since he didn't know whether to believe it or not, he could prepare for it together. In that case, both sides should prepare for it together. We'll see the results half a month later. Deng Chunfei had the same idea as Luo Yuanjun when he left. But after thinking about it for a night, he decided to believe Dong Lijia. Then he quickly took out his savings and found the fastest way to buy food, oil, and a car. At the same time, he began to sell all the assets he had. His family background was not ordinary, so he was a little faster than Dong Lijia when it came to these things. After all, the procedures were too complicated. If he wanted to get the money as soon as possible, he had to lower the price to the minimum. But more than 10 days were still not enough. Luo Yuanjun didn't have so many things to do, because his family's business was not in his hands, but in the hands of his brother and his father. He couldn't interfere with his family's business at all, so he didn't want to think about it. He took out his own money, although he was idle all day. But he was an invisible stock trader, so he had a lot of money in his bank. After taking out all the money, he tried to imagine the scene after the apocalypse. He took out a piece of paper and made a list. The list was divided into 3 categories: food, weapons, and transportation. Then he divided a bunch of food and other things from the food. He had to ask Deng Chunfei for help with the weapons, and the transportation was mainly trucks, off-road vehicles, and so on. Unfortunately, he didn't have much money, so he could only buy a helicopter at most. After making the list, he suddenly thought of Dong Lijia's situation. Damn. No wonder he said he would go to them. He must go. He had sold all the shares of his company and all the valuable things in his house. He guessed that he had even mortgaged his house to the bank to borrow a lot of money. He thought that they had used all the money to buy food and weapons, so he had already prepared everything. They were not afraid of the apocalypse. Luo Yuanjun thought that if it was true, he would go to them. Chapter 1244. Time slowly passed day by day, and soon, half a month was about to arrive. One day before the doomsday, Lin Wenwen suddenly had a premonition. Xin, it seems that we are going to be separated. Lin Wenwen stood on the balcony of Dong Xinxin's new residence in Haiqing and watched the sun gradually set. Then he suddenly muttered to himself, "What's wrong? Do you feel anything?" Dong Xinxin's voice sounded in her mind. Recently, Dong Xinxin's spiritual power had been getting stronger, and the time she could control her body was getting longer and longer. As long as she did not do any strenuous exercise for the time being, she could stay in her body for a few days. But strenuous exercise could enhance her spiritual power, so she still chose to control her body for a short period of time to exercise. Then she handed over control to Lin Wenwen and let her continue to exercise. Although Lin Wenwen had never said what her special ability was, Dong Xinxin was more or less aware of it since they were in the same body. The two of them did not know how to say it. One special ability could go back to the past, while the other's special ability could perceive the future. Yes, I saw it. Tonight you will still fall into a coma, but your special ability will directly awaken. Maybe your awakening special ability triggered something. I think I can go back. Lin Wenwen smiled. Dong Xinxin's face was still a little baby face, tender, and there were 2 small dimples when she smiled. It was very beautiful. But this small face with the current Dong Xinxin was a little, well, subtle. Because the current Dong Xinxin was very violent. Whether it was when she was practicing with Dong Lijia or when she was fighting with Deng Chunfei and Luo Yuanjun, she was not gentle at all. Her movements were also very sharp, and her character was also fierce. Now she was a violent Lolita. She looked very cute, and she was short. Like a small animal, people thought that she was the kind of girl who was easily timid and afraid, but the truth was not like that. Her appearance was too deceiving. I can awaken tonight? Sure enough, this time is different from before. I only awakened my special ability a few years after the doomsday. Dong Xinshin sighed, and there was a little indescribable complex emotion in her tone. And you don't need to do anything. When you wake up, this body will only belong to you, Lin Wenwen said. After knowing Dong Xinshin for 3 months, she knew that Dong Xinshin was actually a good girl. It was just that they were forced by the post-apocalyptic environment to become cold and selfish. Lin Wenwen took a nap at noon and dreamed of the next morning's chaotic morning. Just like last time, the morning was eerily quiet. Usually, at 6 or 7 o'clock, many breakfast shops would open for business, and the number of people going to work or to school gradually increased on the streets. However, there were surprisingly few people that day. Many of the old shops were not open, and there were not many people working or students. There were not even many cars on the road. But Lin Wenwen couldn't stay here until morning. Although she could see tomorrow when she opened her eyes, she had already returned to the base 7 years later. The scene in the dream blurred for a moment in the cold morning, and then she appeared in a room that looked like a hospital ward. He walked to the window and took a look. The buildings outside the window were all renovated. The sky was gray, the air was oppressive, and there were many familiar scents. Is that so? You don't need me to do it? Then I haven't finished what I promised you. Hearing what Lin Wenwen said, Dong Xinshin's tone became a little unhappy. She was also a person who paid attention to promises. Since she had promised, she had to do it. If she hadn't done anything, the promise would have been completed for some other reason. That meant that she didn't have any credit. She didn't do what she promised. This kind of situation where she said she could do it but didn't do it would be stuck in her heart. What does it matter? As long as I can go back, it's fine. Lin Wenwen didn't care about this matter. Dong Xinshin said, that can't be done. I dragged you here. I also asked you to help me modify my body, but I didn't do anything. That's too much of a bargain for me. I'm not a person who likes to take advantage of others. Lin Wenwen listened to her inexplicably stubborn words and smiled. It can't be considered as taking advantage of others. I also borrowed a lot of money from your brother. And I can also collect so many clean materials before the end of the world. It can be considered as a profit for me. Thinking that he had borrowed money from Dong Lijia no less than 5 times, Lin Wenwen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because Dong Lijia had to lend money to her even though he knew that she wouldn't return it. The conflicted expression on her face was quite amusing. Do you think Deng Chunfei and Luo Yuanjun will want to burn incense and pray to you after they see what happens tomorrow? Lin Wenwen suddenly thought of the arrival of Doomsday tomorrow and everyone's terrified and desperate reaction. He didn't know how Deng Chunfei and Luo Yuanjun would react when they saw what happened. They should be glad that at least they weren't too stupid and knew to prepare for a contingency plan. What the hell do you mean by pray to me? I'm not dead. Hearing Lin Wenwen's words, Dong Xinshin complained with some dissatisfaction. Who said that burning incense and praying to a dead person? Those in other temples are all worshipping Buddha, okay? Lin Wenwen said with a smile. But I'm not Buddha, Dong Xinshin said helplessly. Now that you know everything that happened in the past 7 years, you are no different from a god or a Buddha. You know what's going to happen with just a pinch of your fingers. Lin Wenwen continued to joke. The setting sun in the sky was getting lower and lower. It was a rare purple-red color. It was beautiful. Many people looked up at the purple-red clouds in the sky. But they didn't know what would happen to them tonight. Dong Lijia, who was in the next room, was also standing on the balcony and looking at the sky. It was a rare sight. But no matter how beautiful the sky was, it couldn't relieve his depression about the disaster that would happen tomorrow. The peaceful and beautiful era was coming to an end, and the next day was going to be chaos and fear. Although they had already deployed their men, and those who stayed with them were all selected by Dong Xinshin himself, they weren't bad people. His heart wasn't bad, and his character wasn't bad either. In the face of life and death, he wouldn't do something inhumane. Don't go out tonight. Stay in your rooms and lock the door. Starting tomorrow, no matter what sounds come from outside, do not open the door if you want to know what happened. If you want to know what happened, you can look down from the window. Open the door and gather in the hallway in 3 days. After dark, Dong Lijia gave the order to everyone. The residential building they were in was rented as a whole. The doors and windows had been changed from wood to steel, and it was a double-layered security door. With the ability of ordinary zombies, they may be able to break through a wooden door, but they can't break through a metal door. Dong Lijia gave everyone 3 days' worth of food and water, and each room had its own balcony and bathroom. They all lived on the top 3 floors and didn't let anyone live on the lower floors. However, the doors were locked. The entire building's exit was locked. Chapter 1245. Dong Lijia and Dong Xinxin chose a relatively remote place. There were several modified off-road vehicles and 3 metal trucks in the open space downstairs. Except for the 4 people of the Dong family, the people following them didn't know what they were going to do. But since they had accepted the commission, they could only do as they said. There were also more than a dozen people who were arrested by Dong Xinxin and Dong Lijia's father. After more than a month, these people's emotions were either numb or had calmed down. Anyway, Dong Lijia said that as long as after tonight, if they wanted to leave, they would not stop them. Although they didn't know why the Dong family sent people to arrest people from various industries and put them under house arrest for no reason. They had food, drink, and sleep, and the treatment was not bad. In addition to not being able to leave the room, they didn't need to do anything, just let them stay like hostages. In the beginning, no matter how they resisted, it was of no use. They slowly calmed down and began to accept Dong Lijia's words. After tonight, let them make a new choice. Why must they stay with us? Dong Lijia ran to Dong Xinxin's room and asked puzzledly. After Lin Wenwen handed over the control of her body to Dong Xinxin, she stayed in Dong Xinxin's strange small space to read a book. Dong Xinxin's small space was very strange, she could feel it, but she couldn't put things in it. She could only let Lin Wenwen in and let her out. Others couldn't, such as Dong Lijia. She didn't know what kind of a tribute this small space was. Because they will be useful to us in the future, don't ask. Remember to check whether the locks of all the entrances and exits are locked. Everyone may not feel anything tonight. Dong Xinxin waved his hand and reminded him. Tonight, everyone will unconsciously fall into a state of dormancy, and then the changes in their bodies will slowly begin. If the door is not locked, it will be troublesome if you don't wake up tomorrow and the zombies outside sneak in. I know, didn't you say that the people here will not mutate? Now there are no people around this building, only the people in our building will have problems. Dong Lijia nodded. Although I remember those people, I can't guarantee that what happened now will remain the same. Dong Xinxin shrugged. What if she remembered wrong? What if there was an accident? These were all things that he had to take precautions against. The sky grew darker and darker. There was supposed to be a moon today. Although it wasn't a full moon, there was still some light shining on the ground. But for some reason, the moonlight seemed to have become blurry, and gradually, even the moonlight disappeared. After Dong Xinxin locked the doors and windows, he turned on the light and lay on the bed. She didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, waiting. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered and went out. The room was instantly plunged into darkness. Dong Xinxin began to feel a strange feeling of his body sinking, and his head was getting heavier and heavier. His eyelids began to close unconsciously. Here it comes. If everyone had already fallen asleep, they wouldn't have such a feeling. Only someone like Dong Xinxin, who was awake and waiting, could sense it. Other than her, Dong Lijia and their parents had not slept at all. It wasn't until now that they felt their bodies sinking uncontrollably that they realized what was happening. Lin Wenwen, who was in Dong Xinxin's space, also had a strange feeling. She felt a sense of oppression coming from Dong Xinxin's small space. Lin Wenwen looked up and shone the flashlight. She saw that the walls of Dong Xinxin's small space were twisting and moving strangely, and it seemed to be slowly approaching Lin Wenwen. She looked around and found that it wasn't approaching her. Instead, the space was shrinking, and the 4 sides and the top were shrinking towards her. Why did this space shrink? Wouldn't that squash her flat? What should she do? Although she thought so in her mind, Lin Wenwen wasn't worried, because she felt that this small space seemed to have something important to do with her going back 7 years. She could only go back from here. Seeing the change in the space, Lin Wenwen shouted Dong Xinxin's name, Xinxin. No response. She shouted again, Dong Xin Xin? Still no response. It seemed that it had begun. Her body had begun to mutate. That was why this small space had changed. Seeing that the wall was getting closer and closer, and the oppressive atmosphere was getting stronger and stronger, Lin Wenwen closed her eyes uncomfortably. She felt as if her chest was slowly being blocked by something, and she felt suffocated. Just when Lin Wenwen began to feel suffocated, her mind began to become dizzy. Then she felt that her spiritual power began to weaken, and she gradually lost consciousness. After Lin Wenwen lost consciousness, the small space squeezed her whole body. Then her entire body began to twist, and as it twisted, it became a whirlpool. Then Lin Wenwen and the small space disappeared together. Dong Xin Xin, who was in a coma, didn't know that Lin Wenwen had disappeared because she also lost consciousness. Everyone in the whole building fell into a quiet lying position in the dark room, with their eyes closed. Of course, it wasn't just this building. The villages and towns within a kilometer or two away, the city, the province, and all over the country were collectively in the same state. Gradually, some people in all places stopped breathing, and their vital signs began to disappear. In the darkness, their faces slowly began to turn white and blue little by little. The eye sockets of their two eyes began to turn from blue to black, and their hair lost its luster and became dry. Their fingernails also slowly grew and became hard and sharp. The joints of their whole body became stiff, and their bodies became hard. The sky began to slowly brighten, and a gray light spread from the horizon. In an apartment, a couple was lying on the bed in a bedroom. The man's face was pale, and his two eye sockets were black as if he had been punched twice. His originally thick black hair had turned into yellow straw overnight. The hostess's expression was as usual, and there was no change. She woke up, and her eyes moved under her eyelids and opened. Then after a few seconds of confusion, her eyes became clear. Then she subconsciously turned her head to look in the direction of her husband, and as a result, as soon as she turned her head, she saw a pale face, a pair of black eye circles, pale lips, and yellow hair. Old husband. The woman was startled and instinctively screamed and stepped back. The man seemed to have heard her scream, and at this moment he opened his eyes. But a pair of strange black eyes with no white and no pupils were revealed. Ah! Chapter 1246. When Lin Wenwen opened her eyes again, she found herself lying on a bed. She sat up and looked at the surrounding environment. It was a little familiar, as if she had seen it somewhere before. She turned her head and glanced around, and then found that this was the scene she saw in her dream. So, she seemed to be back. Thinking of this, Lin Wenwen suddenly got out of bed, stepped on the floor barefoot, and trotted to the window. Then she looked outside. Yes, these renovated houses, and there was a familiar atmosphere around. Looking up, the sky was gray, making people feel very depressed. However, for Lin Wenwen, this was indeed a familiar scene that she used to be familiar with. Now it was a little strange but familiar. She was back. This time it was real, not a dream. Just as Lin Wenwen was feeling emotional, Lin Hao, who was on the other side, suddenly sensed a familiar atmosphere. He instantly threw down the medical information in his hand, stood up from the chair, and ran out of the office. Then he rushed in Lin Wenwen's direction. Lin Wenwen stood by the window and looked at the scenery outside, and then she suddenly thought of something. She closed her eyes and sensed it, and found that everything in the space was still there. Only then did she feel at ease, turned around, and walked toward the door. The door was not locked, so she opened it with a pull. Just as she walked out of the room, she heard a shout from the other side of the corridor, "One!" She turned her head and saw Lin Hao running toward her with a nervous and excited face. Lin Hao rushed in front of her, immediately pressed his hands on her shoulders, and looked her up and down. He asked nervously, "Where did you disappear to? What's going on? Also, do you feel anything from your body? What about your special ability?" Although Lin Wenwen was 2 years older than him, Lin Hao rarely called her sister, and he directly called her by her name. Lin Wenwen looked at his nervous look and asked, "How long did I disappear?" Lin Hao looked at her and said, "More than half a month." He looked at Lin Wenwen's condition and found that she seemed to be fine. Lin Hao was slightly relieved, and then he stared at her and asked, "When you disappeared, we thought you were taken away by someone else, but after checking your ward many times, they said that no one else had been here. We also investigated the base for a long time, but we couldn't find any clues about your disappearance. Later, they guessed that you might have run into your own dimension, but there was no clear evidence. So where have you been for the past half a month?" Lin Wenwen looked at him and suddenly smiled mysteriously. "Maybe you won't believe me. Look at this." With that, she took out a bag of catnip from her space and threw it in front of Lin Hao. Lin Hao was curiously waiting for her answer, but she suddenly threw out a bag of grass? But when he took a closer look, his eyes suddenly widened in shock. "So early?" Lin Wenwen said, "You didn't expect that, did you?" "While I was there, I saw a vision." He felt that this was very important, so he thought of ways to get a lot of them. "How was it? What's this catnip for? Is this uncontaminated catnip?" "Really?" Lin Hao had already squatted on the ground and opened the bag. Then, he fished out a handful of catnip and put it in his hand to size it up. After carefully sensing it, there was not a trace of virus infection. So, this was the purest catnip grass. "It's really not infected. That's great. That's great. Woman, how did you get these? How did you get these? Where did you get them?" After confirming that the catnip was indeed not infected, Lin Hao stood up excitedly, looked at Lin Wenwen, and blurted out. He didn't even think before he spoke. After all, it was difficult to find a bag of pure catnip in the apocalypse, let alone such a big bag. Before the apocalypse. Lin Wenwen looked at him with a smile. After Lin Hao heard it as she expected, his expression was stunned. Then he looked at her blankly and asked, "Before the apocalypse? What do you mean?" He didn't understand. What did she mean before the apocalypse? Could it be that she went back to 7 years ago? How could it be possible? Lin Wenwen knew that his expression would be so funny, so she continued to smile and said, "Yes, that's right. It was before the apocalypse. Otherwise, where could you find so many pure plants now?" After Lin Hao heard it, he looked at her and was silent for 3 seconds before saying, "Are you kidding me?" Lin Wenwen saw his expression was really funny. She had never seen such a shrewd brother show such an expression. "Oh, that's not right. It was common when she was young, but it was rarely seen when she grew up." She covered her mouth and laughed, then explained, "Didn't you just ask me where I went? I went back to 7 years ago. So isn't it before the apocalypse?" Lin Hao stood next to her with his hands crossed in front of his chest. He looked at her speechlessly. "Is your brain broken? It's not time travel. How can you go back to 7 years ago?" Lin Wenwen saw that this guy had an expression of disbelief, so she said with some boredom, "Hey, it's fine if you don't believe me. But I'm not lying to you. Otherwise, where do you think I got these catnip? And look, these vegetables are all fresh." In order to prove that she really went back to 7 years ago, Lin Wenwen took out some fresh vegetables and fruits that she had previously purchased and stored in the space for him to see. Lin Hao looked at the tomatoes and vegetable cores in her left hand, and the apples and pears in her right hand. There was no smell of infection. Just like the catnip on the ground, they were as clean as ordinary fruits and vegetables before the apocalypse. He put it in his hand with some uncertainty and carefully sensed it with his superpower. It was really clean. There was no mutated energy after the apocalypse, and there was no virus energy. Is it true? Lin Hao looked at her hesitantly. There was some disbelief in his eyes, and there was some feeling of doubting life. Lin Wenwen was happy to see his dumbfounded expression. She nodded, "Yes, it's true. And you said that I only disappeared for more than half a month, but in fact, I stayed there for 3 months. Just 3 months before the apocalypse." Lin Hao's face gradually changed into a "what the hell?" expression, then he looked at her, then looked at the fruit in his hand, then looked at her, and then looked at the fruit in his hand. More importantly, he stared at the big bag of catnip on the ground and was silent for a while. "Isn't it amazing? At first, I didn't believe that I went back to the past. I felt like I was dreaming. And when I went back, I ran into someone else's body, not even back to my own body." Lin Wenwen smiled and walked to the railing of the corridor and leaned against it. Just then, she suddenly thought of something. Her expression sank and she asked, "Right? Who in our base turned purple? Was it poisoned or something? Who is that person?" Chapter 1247. Hearing her words, Lin Hao was slightly startled, then looked at her and said, "How do you know? Do you have telepathy? Wasn't she talking about Yuan Tianxing? Wasn't he the one whose entire body had turned purple as though he had been poisoned? Who is it? What does that person have to do with me?" This time it was Lin Wenwen's turn to be a little anxious and nervous. That man must be very important to her, so in addition to her family, Lin Feng and Lin Hao, it could only be. Thinking of this, Lin Wenwen suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Without waiting for Lin Hao to speak, she rushed in front of him and grabbed his big white hexagram. "Did something happen to Brother Tianxing? Is it him?" Her eyes widened, and there was a complicated expression on her face, as if she didn't want to believe the truth. She probably guessed what had happened, but she was a little unwilling to accept it. So at this time, she asked Lin Hao for confirmation, hoping that his answer would be different from what she thought. However, Lin Hao just nodded to her regretfully and said, "Well, something happened to Brother Tianxing. When he went underground to inquire about the important situation, he encountered some very bad things. So he was poisoned." As soon as she heard Lin Hao's words, her imagination turned out to be true. There was a moment of despair in Lin Wenwen's heart. She opened her eyes and her expression froze for 2 seconds before she asked, "Then, how is he now? Is he still alive?" What she saw at that time was that the man did not lose his breath. So he was still alive. Lin Hao nodded. "Yes, he is not dead yet. But his previous situation is probably not good." "What do you mean by not good?" As soon as Lin Wenwen heard this, her expression changed, and she immediately interrupted him anxiously. Seeing that she was a little excited, Lin Hao quickly comforted her. "Alas, don't worry. Listen to me, okay? You've interrupted the most important thing I wanted to say." Lin Wenwen couldn't help but grab his clothes and shake it. "Then hurry up." "I'll say it. Originally, Brother Tianxing's situation could only be suppressed by my sister at the bottom of the lake in the space, because there was no way to save him and the destructive energy in his body was spreading. But now that you've brought back the uninfected catnip, you've also brought back the medicine that can cure him. That's why I said he couldn't recover before, but now he's fine. How much catnip did you bring back? It can't be that there's only one bag, right?" Lin Hao explained to her, and at the end of the explanation he suddenly thought of an important question. He looked at her nervously and asked, "I've tried my best to collect it. I've gone to many cultivation bases and bought more than 500 kilograms of fresh catnip. But I also bought a lot of seeds. We can plant them in Big Sister's space." Lin Wenwen said in a depressed tone, but when he talked about seeds, his eyes immediately lit up with anticipation. 500 kilograms. So many, it's not a small number. And you even brought back seeds. That's great. This is the most important thing. However, when Lin Hao heard this, his eyes instantly overflowed with light. He was so excited that he couldn't help but grab her hand that was grabbing the front of his shirt, and looked at her with a face full of excitement. Then she continued, "With this catnip, Brother Tianxing's condition will improve. There's hope of dealing with the underworld creatures outside." "Underworld creatures? What underworld creatures? Those without eyes that look like gorillas?" When Lin Wenwen heard this, the first thing that came to her mind was the underground gorillas. Lin Hao shook his head and let go of her hand. At the same time, he pulled her hand down from his clothes. Then he picked up the bag of catnip on the ground and walked to his office. "It's not those. Let's go to my office first. I still want to ask you a lot of questions. It's not those underground gorillas? There are others? By the way, how is Brother Tianxing's condition? What do you think the effect of these catnip is? Can it really save Brother Tianxing?" Lin Wenwen's mind was now on Yuan Tianxing, and she followed Lin Hao to ask him. "Brother Tianxing is now in Big Sister's space, but Big Sister is not at the base now. So we can only wait for her to come back to treat Brother Tianxing. The juice in the catnip contains a substance that has a strong paralyzing effect on the underground creatures that are constantly emerging. and the mutated catnip contains mutated impure energy. If it was pure, it would be more harmful to them, Lin Hao explained to her as they walked. At this moment, a petite figure suddenly flashed in front of the two of them. Sister Wenwen, it's really you. Qiu Lily had sensed Lin Wenwen's aura from far away at Mount Wu, so she immediately rushed over after smelling Lin Wenwen's scent. When she saw Lin Wenwen standing beside Lin Hao, who was still wearing a patient's gown, Qiu Lily was sure that she did not sense wrongly. And I'm back. Did I make you worry these past few days? I'm sorry that I only came back now. Seeing Qiu Lily's big red eyes looking at him in disbelief, Lin Wenwen smiled and comforted her. Where did you go? Why did you suddenly disappear? After Qiu Lily calmed herself down, she finally asked the question that she wanted to know the most. Let's go to Lin Hao's office and I will tell you everything. Lin Wenwen smiled at her. Qiu Lily then followed her to Lin Hao's office in a daze. And when the three of them walked halfway to Lin Hao's office, Lin Kuei appeared in a flash. Originally, he walked with Qiu Lily, but his speed could not keep up with Qiu Lily, who was a level 7 wind element. So he was a step slower before appearing in front of them. After appearing, he looked at Lin Wenwen up and down in surprise, but soon, his gaze was attracted by the bag of grass in Lin Hao's hand. What is that? When Lin Hao saw him asking this, he immediately laughed. Oh, no way? You are very sensitive about this? Really? Even if you are a cat, that is only your special ability, right? You are not a real cat, so you shouldn't really have a reaction to these catnip, right? Hearing this, Lin Wenwen and Qiu Lily immediately stared at Lin Kuei with a subtle expression. Lin Kuei's expression was also subtle. Catnip? Do you feel anything? Qiu Lily saw that after hearing Lin Hao's words, he revealed a subtle expression as if he was deep in thought, and immediately asked curiously. Lin Kuei's gaze drifted a little unnaturally, and then he said, a little. Chapter 1248. Being stared at by Lin Wenwen and the other two, although Lin Kuei's expression remained calm, his eyes still unconsciously glanced at the bag of catnip. Qiu Lily suddenly moved to Lin Hao's side, and then took out a catnip from the bag. Then she walked toward Lin Kuei with a sneaky smile, and then raised the fresh catnip in her hand in front of him. Sure enough, Lin Kuei's eyes were fixed on the catnip, and as Qiu Lily's hand moved left and right, his eyes and head also moved left and right. It was not under his control at all. Pfft. A big man's reaction like a cat, Lin Wenwen couldn't help but laugh. Lin Hao was looking at the interaction between the two of them with a fresh look. Okay, stop it. After Lin Kuei came to his senses, he immediately grabbed Qiu Lily's playful little hand angrily. It's true. There's a reaction. It's amazing. Qiu Lily seemed to have found something fun, and there was a little excitement on her face. At this time, the others continued to walk toward Lin Hao's office. Lin Hao walked while talking about the recent situation outside the base. Since you were in a coma, there have been some strange changes outside the base. Recently, I don't know why, but different strange creatures have emerged from the ground all over the country. Last time you went to Lake Tai, there were some monsters that looked like a lizard but not a lizard, like a crocodile but not a crocodile. The common characteristic of these creatures is that they appear in large groups, and they also carry a very serious poisonous gas. Not only are they harmful to living creatures, but they are also harmful to plants. No wonder I saw that kind of scene, but why did these things suddenly appear? Is there a reason? Lin Wenwen slightly frowned thoughtfully. However, at this time, Qiu Lily suddenly stared at her feet. Sister Wenwen, aren't your feet cold? Why don't you wear shoes? Although she was a zombie, there was not much reaction to the temperature. But looking at Lin Wenwen walking barefoot on the cold floor, she felt cold just by looking at it. Lin Wenwen stopped and looked down, only to find that she was barefoot. I didn't pay attention just now, I actually forgot. Saying that, she took out a pair of spare slippers from her space and threw them in front of her feet. However, it was also because she was a psychic that she was in good health. This bit of coldness did not have much of a reaction to her. Can you still see what's going on over there? Did you successfully advance your second ability? Lin Hao asked her curiously after he saw her put on her shoes and walked into the office. I guess so. I don't have a headache or dizziness anymore. Moreover, the space element's energy was also recovering. It seemed like he had succeeded. But I did see a lot of images. Lin Wenwen nodded and said, "Where did you go? Isn't it inside the space?" Qiu Lily asked in puzzlement when she heard them talking about that side and that side. How should I put it? I didn't enter the space, but another space and time. Lin Wenwen paused for a moment before answering her question. Apart from Lin Hao, who had already understood the situation, the other two looked at her in confusion. Lin Hao took the catnip that he had been holding in his hand and sat on his desk. Then he stared at the catnip left and right. After hearing Lin Wenwen's words, he looked up at the other people's expressions. He said casually, "She said she went back to 7 years ago. Look at this. This is what she brought back from 7 years ago." When Qiu Lily and Lin Kuei heard this, their expressions became similar to Lin Hao's. However, Lin Kuei was calmer, while Qiu Lily was dumbfounded. Lin Hao looked at their expressions amusedly, thinking that his expression must have been the same just now. And I did suddenly go back to 7 years ago. And it wasn't my own reason, I was involved in it by someone else. But going back there doesn't seem to be a bad thing. Lin Wenwen sat on another chair in front of Lin Hao's desk and then pointed to the bag of catnip. Qiu Lily listened to her words, looked at the big sack she was pointing at, and then looked at the catnip that Lin Kuei had been holding on to since he snatched it from her hand. Really? There's such a thing? Did your special ability upgrade? Not only can you predict the future, but you can also go back in time? Qiu Lily's thought was simple. She felt that it had something to do with Lin Wenwen's special ability. Lin Wenwen shook her head. No, didn't I say it? I was involved in it by someone else. Qiu Lily looked at her with a strange expression. No wonder you disappeared for no reason. We couldn't find the reason for your disappearance even after searching for half a month. Lin Wenwen smiled. This is also an uncontrollable factor. I don't even know why I ran back. But where is my big sister? Isn't she in the base now? She suddenly remembered that Yuan Tianxing was in a critical situation and was in Lin Xiao's space. Lin Wenwen wanted to run to her with the catnip in her hand and then give her the catnip to treat Yuan Tianxing. Xiao went to China. Qiu Lily looked at her and said, "Why did she go to China again?" Lin Wenwenlu was also surprised. She thought her sister was going out to deal with the underground creatures. Why did she go to China again? It's because Huaxiao wants to hold a conference on the underground creatures. I guess they're trying to snatch the intelligence from others. Qiu Lily pouted in disdain. As soon as Lin Wenwen heard this, he could roughly guess what was going on. She showed a gloomy expression and said, "I don't know what Sikong Qin is up to again. Since she went to China, she couldn't go to China again. That would only cause trouble for her sister, so she could only wait for them to come back. What about Teng? Is he at my big brother's house?" She suddenly thought of Ting Teng. The adults had gone far away, so the child should be at the base. It was most likely to be at Lin Feng's house. Lin Hao shook his head. "No, I brought Ting Teng with me." Lin Wenwen was stunned when he heard that. It was different from what he had expected. But she quickly skipped over this question and said, "Then when will she come back? Can brother Tianxing wait?" "Yes, he can. Don't worry. There's a leader. Although her space can't cure brother Tianxing, it can suppress his condition. So as long as he is in the lake in the leader space, he will be fine." Lin Hao saw that she only cared about Yuan Tianxing and couldn't help but say unhappily, "All right, since you brought so much catnip back, hurry up and find Big Brother to deal with it. Then let's get Big Brother to settle this first. We have to send it to Lung Xiantong first, and we have to send a portion of it to Sea City." Chapter 1249. Oh! Lin Wenwen was quickly chased out. She changed her clothes and went to find Lin Feng. But before she arrived at Lin Hao's medical center, she saw Lin Feng rushing over in the hall of the medical center. Wenwen. Lin Feng cried out in disbelief when he saw her. "Brother!" Lin Wenwen smiled when she saw him and walked towards him. "It's really you. You're back?" Lin Feng strode in front of her and pressed his hands on her shoulders in the same motion as Lin Hao. Then he looked her up and down. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with Lin Wenwen, he heaved a sigh of relief. That's great. You look fine. Tell me, where have you been all this time? Do you know how anxious we were because of your disappearance? Let's go to Leng Xuantong's place first. I'll tell you on the way. Lin Wenwen dragged his arm and walked out. Have you seen Lin Hao? Lin Feng was dragged out by her. She said that she was going to Leng Xuantong's place. It was probably something important. He followed her out and asked. Of course I've seen him. This is his territory after all. And we've talked about everything that needs to be talked about. I only came after that, Lin Wenwen replied. The two of them walked out. Coincidentally, Lin Feng also drove over. He got into his car and drove towards the second base. Brother, I brought back some uninfected catnip. I heard from Lin Hao that this grass is very important, right? After sitting in the car, Lin Wenwen took out a catnip and held it in front of Lin Feng. Lin Feng was stunned. Then he stared at the plant in her hand and asked, Where did you get this? As he said that, he took the catnip from her hand and couldn't believe his eyes. After staring at the green leaf in his hand, he looked at Lin Wenwen in a daze. He could sense the aura coming from the plant in his hand. It was the cleanest plant he had ever seen in the apocalypse. There was no trace of infection or mutation. It was as if it had never experienced the environment of the apocalypse. I'm afraid you won't believe me. I brought this back 7 years ago, Lin Wenwen said to him with a smile. 7 years ago? Did you leave these behind 7 years ago? No, if it was left behind by you 7 years ago, it can only be a pile of hay. If it was planted until now, it would have mutated long ago. Lin Feng didn't quite understand what she was saying. He thought that when she said 7 years ago, she must have accidentally left it behind 7 years ago. But 7 years had passed, so it was impossible for it to remain so fresh, unless it was planted in the soil. It was 7 years ago, but it hasn't been 7 years. Instead, I directly put it into the space from 7 years ago and brought it back. It had been less than 2 months since they were plucked. Fortunately, I could freeze their changes in my space. Don't you want to know where I've been for the past half a month? Lin Wenwen explained. Not even 7 years? It's only been 2 months? What do you mean? Lin Feng listened to her words and looked at the catnip leaves in his hand in confusion. She continued, Haven't you been unconscious in your own space for more than half a month? He still believed what Lin Hao said before. After all, Lin Xiao was also a space type, and a similar situation had occurred. Lin Wenwen was also a space type, and after many investigations, he couldn't find any clues about her disappearance. So he would rather believe that Lin Wenwen disappeared because of him. Well, I transmigrated. I suddenly returned to the 7th year, 3 months before the apocalypse, and I stayed there for 3 whole months. I only returned here on the day the apocalypse arrived. Lin Wenwen said after thinking for a while. Transmigrated? Lin Feng looked at her calmly. Lin Wenwen saw his expression and nodded with a smile. Lin Feng continued to look at her calmly. Lin Wenwen. The two looked at each other silently for a few seconds, and then the atmosphere suddenly became a little subtle. Even the driver in front kept looking up at the rearview mirror, quietly observing the expressions of the two of them. At this time, little A, who was driving, was also dumbfounded. What did he hear? His boss's sister could actually transmigrate. What an awesome skill! And after transmigrating to the past, she could transmigrate back again. That was amazing! Lin Feng and Lin Wenwen looked at each other silently for 7 to 8 seconds before finally breaking the silence. Is it true? Lin Wenwen saw that her brother's usually serious expression was a little cracked, and she felt it was funny. On the surface, she nodded calmly. Yes, it's true. Really, it's not a dream. Otherwise, do you think I can bring this back in a dream? After saying that, she pointed at the grass in Lin Feng's hand. Lin Feng. When they arrived at Base 2's Leng Xuantong's Research Institute, Lin Feng saw that Lin Wenwen still had a face of doubt, but he had to believe it. After all, that catnip was the most direct evidence. Alright, you said you brought some back. How much did you bring? And how did you know we need this now? After getting out of the car, Lin Feng remembered the important question and asked her. Because I saw it with my second ability, although I'm not quite sure what's going on. I felt that this might be very important, so I went around to buy it, Lin Wenwen replied. After the guard of the research institute saw Lin Feng, he immediately led them in while informing Leng Xiantong inside. How much did you bring back? Lin Feng asked. 500 kilograms, and I also brought 80 kilograms of seeds, Lin Wenwen replied. And seeds? That's great. Smart. Once he heard that she brought seeds back, Lin Feng immediately turned his head and looked at her happily. Lin Wenwen smiled without being modest. Of course. Your sister, has never been stupid, okay? At this moment, Bao Xiaoying and Bao Xiaoguo walked out. Deputy leader, the section chief is in the lab now. He said you can go there directly. Lin Feng nodded, and let's go. When everyone arrived at the door of the lab, Lin Feng pointed at the rows of test grooves in the lab and said, those are the parts of the underground creatures we encountered outside. Now Leng Xiantong has been studying how to deal with these things. Lin Wenwen walked in and looked at the test grooves cautiously. On them were the types, names, attributes, test time, and so on. Miss Wenwen is back? That's great. Leng Xiantong, who was bending over to stare at the experiment table, heard the sound and straightened up. He turned his head and saw Lin Wenwen. Then he said in surprise. She just came back and she brought back something good. Lin Feng smiled and handed the catnip in his hand to him like he was presenting a treasure. Chapter 1250. As Lin Feng expected, Leng Xuantong's eyes widened when he saw the plant in Lin Feng's hand. He popped his eyes and rushed at Lin Feng, snatching the plant from his hand as he said excitedly, It's not infected. It's really not infected. He held the plant in his hand and carefully sensed it. It was so clean that he couldn't believe it. Leng Xiantong looked at Lin Feng excitedly and said, Where did you get this? Do you have more? Lin Feng pointed at Lin Wenwen and said, She brought back 500 kilograms of fresh catmint. She also brought back some uninfected seeds. As long as we plant them in chief space, we'll have plenty of catmint in the future. Really? That's great. Where did Mississippi Wenwen find it? And so much of it? Leng Xiantong wore a delightful look on his face. Then he looked at Lin Wenwen with confusion. That's a secret for now. Lin Wenwen said to him with a smile, then made a step backward and waved a hand. Following her move, 3 large bags of catmint showed up in the clearing before her eyes. Seeing the 3 bags, Leng Xuantong's eyes glowed. He showed a thirsty look, as if he had seen 3 large bags of catmint before the apocalypse. Is this enough for you to study? I have some more. Should we send the rest to Sea City Base? Lin Wenwen first asked Leng Xiantong, then turned and asked Lin Feng. It's enough. These are all pure catmint. They haven't mutated. Their juice is hundreds of times more effective than the catmint we've found before. We can dilute the catmint and do experiments. Leng Xiantong nodded quickly with delight. Lin Feng nodded and said, Sea City Base needs to produce catmint weapons. We can send some to them. I reckon that with the pure attribute catmint, their weapons will be even more powerful. Sea City Base was cooperating with All Beings Base to produce the weapons. All Beings Base provided the information about the catmint, while Sea City Base was responsible for developing the weapons. 30% of the products would go to All Beings Base. After leaving the research institute, Lin Feng sent Lin Wenwen straight to Sea City Base. Aside from Lao San, Lao Lu, Jingyan, and the others from the zombie army, Qin Yu, Sun Lunan, Do Yunfan, and Jiang Anan, who had been training in the army recently, were also there to escort her. After arriving at All Beings Base with Lin Xiao, Jiang Anan directly joined the army there. A level 4 Earth-type special ability was not considered high, but it was not considered low either. Moreover, she was more familiar with Sea City. Ever since the incident with Bai Shuer, Jiang Anan had become even more reclusive. In his eyes, there was only the mission. When he was in the army, he only knew how to train himself every day. With a cold and scarred face, He was always alone. Only when she returned home and saw her mother would her aura soften a little. The journey from All Beings Base to Sea City Base was peaceful. They encountered a few mutated beasts, but didn't run into any trouble, neither did they encounter any underground creatures. They arrived at Sea City very smoothly. After entering the Sea City Base, number 3, number 6, and the other zombies didn't follow them. She stayed outside the base and found a place nearby to wait for Lin Wenwen to finish her work and come back. Jiang Anan, Qin Yu, and the others had been following Lin Wenwen the whole time. The person in charge of developing weapons in Sea City was a weaponsmith. He was an old man with white hair. Even Xiao Yunlong didn't dare to talk loudly to him, as he had to lower his voice. Of course, Xiao Yunlong wouldn't bring Lin Wenwen and the others to the weaponsmith base. Lin Wenwen was an acquaintance of his anyway. In order to save himself some trouble, Xiao Yunlong directly brought her to the reception room. "I guess you're fine. I guess Lin Feng and Lin Hao have been worried sick about you since you disappeared. But still, they couldn't find you," Xiao Yunlong observed Lin Wenwen the first thing he did when he saw her. Lin Wenwen smiled but didn't say anything. "But, why are you here to deliver the materials this time? Don't you always send others to deliver the materials?" Xiao Yunlong didn't know what Lin Wenwen was going to deliver. According to Lin Feng's message, it was a very important material. "Because it's safer to put it in my space. There are quite a lot of things." Lin Wenwen looked around and gave Xiao Yunlong a signal with her eyes. Thankfully, Xiao Yunlong immediately understood her meaning. It seemed that she still needed to keep it a secret. So, he waved a hand and told his people to leave. As no one else was in the living room, Lin Wenwen told Qin Yu and the others to leave as well. Only she, Xiao Yunlong, and Meng Yu stayed in the room. Lin Wenwen stood up from the couch and walked to the middle of the living room, then took out 100 kilograms of catmint from her space and put it on the ground. "These are all pure catmint. There's no virus in them. These 100 kilograms should be very useful for you, right?" She looked at Xiao Yunlong and said. Xiao Yunlong stared at the large pile of bags that Lin Wenwen took out. Hearing her say that the catmint was pure and uninfected, he didn't believe her. Immediately, he looked at her in disbelief. "Never been infected? That's impossible, isn't it? Is it possible to find uninfected plants now?" Lin Wenwen shrugged, then stepped back to the couch and sat down. "You can see for yourself if you don't believe me." Before Xiao Yunlong moved, Meng Yu, who was sitting beside him, had already stood up and walked to those bags, touching them with her hands. Then she said, "She's right. These are all pure catmint. There's no virus at all." "No way. Really?" Xiao Yunlong was a little surprised to hear that. Meng Yu had plant power. If she said that there was no virus, then there was no virus. She couldn't be wrong. But how could that be possible? Now, after the second mutation of the virus, there were almost no pure and original plants left. How did All Beings Base find those catmint? And there were so many of them. Xiao Yunlong couldn't believe it. He moved to the front and opened one of the bags to look inside. As he expected, there was a pile of fresh catmint leaves and roots. He didn't sense any virus at all. Meng Yu wore a look of disbelief as she looked at Lin Wenwen and asked, "Where did you get these?" Lin Wenwen smiled and said, "That's a secret. We can provide more for you in the future. But on one condition, you need to give us 10% more weapons." Xiao Yunlong and Meng Yu didn't react strongly to her request. They glanced at each other and fell into deep thoughts. In fact, Lin Wenwen's request wasn't unreasonable. After all, catmint was the most important material for making weapons. The pureness of the catmint would certainly play a great role in the weapons. If they provided all the catmint, they would get 40% of the finished products. Only the technology and materials of weapons were found in the sea. 60% wasn't too much, but it wasn't too little either. Chapter 1251. Okay, no problem. If it's all these pure grass, then giving you 30% is a loss. Xiao Yunlong nodded, then turned to look at Lin Wenwen. Lin Wenwen smiled and said, "Thank you for your cooperation." At this time, she suddenly said to Xiao Yunlong, "By the way, can I trouble you to do me a favor?" When Xiao Yunlong heard that she wanted to ask him for help, he stood up and walked back to his seat. He asked her, "What is it?" Lin Wenwen took out a piece of paper, put it on the coffee table and said, "Help me find a few people, they should be in your base." Meng Yu walked over and picked up the paper she put on the table, opened it and looked at it. "Dong Xinxin? Dong Lijia? Do you have any problems looking for them?" Lin Wenwen looked at her. "Why? Do you know them?" Meng Yu shook her head. "No, I'm just curious. I'll help you check." "Thank you." Lin Wenwen smiled and nodded to her. Then Lin Wenwen stayed in Sea City, waiting for Meng Yu to help her find people. At this time, in the base of Huaxia, Lin Xiao took Li Zheng and the others to live with Wu Qingyue and the others in the embassy building arranged by Huaxia. In the lobby of the embassy, they also met the current leader of the Black Dragon base, Du Kuanxing. This man was still handsome. When he smiled, he was quite sunny, reducing a lot of his age. He was clearly a man in his early 30s, but he looked like a young man in his 20s. But when he didn't smile, the gloomy temperament did not weaken much. "Long time no see, Leader Wu and Leader Lu are here too. But you are not the last, there are still people who haven't arrived." Seeing Wu Qingyue and Lin Xiao appear together, Du Kuanxing stood up and greeted them with a smile. "The last one is from Qingshan base. He is probably very busy in the base now." Wu Qingyue smiled at Du Kuanxing. Lin Xiao had never seen Du Kuanxing before, and this was the first time she saw him. And it was also the first time for Du Kuanxing to see her. Both sides just smiled politely. "This should be the beautiful leader of the base that I've heard of recently. I am Du Kuanxing from the Black Dragon base." Du Kuanxing looked at Lin Xiao with interest. Although his gaze and actions were a little impolite, he didn't mean anything bad. Previously, he was quite interested in this new female leader because he was very curious about what kind of woman Wu Qingyue was chasing. Now that he had seen her, he felt that she was indeed very beautiful, and her temperament was also very good. Moreover, her figure was very hot. Even if she was wearing the military uniform specially made for leaders, it couldn't cover the high bulge in front of her. Her waist was slender with a belt, and her legs were straight and slender. It was no wonder that Wu Qingyue would chase after such a stunner. Lin Xiao also smiled and looked at him. "I heard that Leader Du is a strange person, but I didn't expect you to not give up the Black Dragon base and leave like Gao Haoyun." Hearing this, Du Kuanxing only smiled faintly and said, "Hee, am I that kind of person? Fortunately, I didn't run away like Gao Haoyun. Otherwise, wouldn't I end up like him?" That's not necessarily the case. Even if he didn't leave, he would still end up dead. Lin Xiao knew that he was joking, so she casually replied. Then she said, "All right, why are we talking about a dead person here? I wonder if there's any news about Du Shouxian's arrival here?" As she spoke, she walked to the sofa, sat down, and looked up at Du Kuanxing. Du Kuanxing understood that she was asking about Huaxia, so he sat down and said, "Although I also want to know about their plans, unfortunately, I didn't manage to find out any news about them. I heard that your base was the first to encounter the underground creatures. Have you researched any ways to deal with them?" He was referring to the group of underground gorillas. They were indeed the first to appear. Lin Xiao nodded. "The first ones to appear at our base. Although they are very strong, they have a big weakness. They can't come out during the day to be exposed to the sunlight, so they didn't recklessly invade our base. As for effective methods, there is one, but it's not convenient to say it now. As for effective methods, I do have them, but it's not convenient to say them now." But seeing that Lin Xiao wasn't willing to say it, he nodded in understanding. However, seeing that Lin Xiao was unwilling to say, he nodded in understanding. After some thought, he changed the topic and turned to look at Wu Qingyue. "However, Sea City has already terminated their cooperation with Huaxia. I didn't expect them to invite great leader Wu over this time." Wu Qingyue looked at him with a smile. "I'm surprised too. I thought they would isolate us." When Du Kuanxing heard this, his expression immediately became gloomy for a moment. "They really wanted to do that. Previously, they even wanted to threaten me to forbid me from continuing to trade with you. It's just that I didn't care about their threats. I'm waiting to see what they're going to do next. But before they can do anything, The underworld creatures appeared. Si Kongqin did something like that? Lin Xiao was speechless when he heard that. He exchanged glances with Wu Qingyue. It seems like Si Kongqin also wants to control the Black Dragon base in China's hands. Wu Qinyue's smile faded. He looked at him and said, "It seems like you didn't agree. But he won't let you go just like that, right?" Du Kuanxing sneered and spread his hands. When Gao Haoyun cooperated with him in the past, he had already planted a lot of people. However, when Gao Haoyun left last time, I took the opportunity to get rid of those people that Si Kongqin planted. Now that he doesn't have any information about us, even if he wants to do something, he won't be in a hurry. Also, it's too late. They were probably still planning something, but the sudden appearance of a large number of strange creatures messed up their plans. By the way, I heard that he went to the northwest not long ago, but it seemed like he didn't achieve anything. As he spoke, he looked at Lin Xiao again. The smile on his young and handsome face seemed to be gloating. Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue both understood that he was referring to Si Kongqin's plan to ambush Dong Xiaowei. However, because of Lin Xiao's appearance, Si Kongqin didn't get anything. Instead, he injured his assistant. Si Kongqin probably has a lot of opinions about Lin Xiao now. It seems like Si Kongqin won't have a good attitude toward her during this meeting. I just happened to pass by. Who asked Si Kongqin to have such bad luck? Lin Xiao smiled and spread his hands. Du Kuanxing said, "But I didn't expect a rank 9 metahuman to appear. The Blue Continent actually has such a trump card. It's not simple." At this time, Wu Qingyue said, "Qingshan base has never been simple. Otherwise, they wouldn't have hidden until now." Chapter 1252. Si Kongqin is now in frequent contact with foreign bases, and he hasn't even done any cover-up work recently. It seems that he doesn't care about us. What do the two leaders think? Du Kuanxing thought of Si Kongqin's recent frequent transactions with foreign bases, and he didn't even need to hide his transactions. He brazenly made those transactions with foreign bases, and the intention behind it was obvious: what he was going to do to other domestic bases that didn't obey him. From the moment he wanted to sneak attack the level 9 leader of Qingshan base, Si Kongqin's ambition became more and more obvious. Wu Qingyue said, "From the moment Si City terminated the transaction with Huaxia, we and Huaxia were already on different sides. Originally, we had planned to go our separate ways after the transaction was concluded. However, it seems that Si Kongqin doesn't want to do that, so of course we won't just let him beat us up." Du Kuanxing looked at him and sighed. "Your Sea City does have the strength to compete with him, but in terms of weapons, you should be at a disadvantage, right?" After all, everyone knew that Sea City's technology was still a few steps behind Huaxia. Hearing his words, Wu Qingyue just smiled calmly. "Although we are slightly inferior in terms of weapons, we will soon catch up to them." Du Kuanxing was slightly startled when he heard his answer, and then said, "It seems that you have already prepared for this, right? As expected of the leader of Sea City, your preparations are more thorough than others think." Wu Qingyue was obviously telling him that Sea City also had a lot of information about Huaxia, and had already prepared a backup plan. Obviously, they didn't need outsiders to worry about them. At this time, in the base, Qiu Lily suddenly found that Lin Kuei had disappeared. That guy's aura wasn't in the base. Where did he go? Qiu Lily was puzzled on the top of a tall building in the base, looking around for Lin Kuei's aura. Not long after, she slowly found the base by following the scent left by Lin Kuei. She didn't know what Lin Kuei went out to do, but Qiu Lily remembered that she had taken a catnip from Lin Wenwen, but Lin Kuei snatched it and didn't return it. Did he go out with the catnip? When Qiu Lily found Lin Kuei a few kilometers away from the base, she saw that he had turned into a big black panther. The strange thing was that he was rubbing his body against a mutated tree. Qiu Lily landed on the roof of a nearby building and looked at him blankly. "What are you doing?" Lin Kuei was leaning against the big tree, wiping himself. He stopped when he heard Qiu Lily's voice. Then he turned to look at Qiu Lily and wagged his long black tail. The pair of leopard eyes flashed with some kind of unknown light. When Qiu Lily met his eyes, she didn't know why, but her heart flashed a subtle premonition. She originally wanted to jump down and lean on him, but because of this, she hesitated and stopped in place. Lin Kuei didn't answer her. He just turned his head and turned around when he saw her. Then, it stared at Chiu Lily and walked towards her step by step with its claws. The long tail behind it swayed left and right from time to time. What are you trying to do? Chiu Lily suddenly felt like she was being stared at by a ferocious beast. The subtle bad feeling in her heart just now immediately grew. She stared at Lin Kuei, who was walking towards her, warily. At this time, Lin Kuei suddenly stopped and then stood silently with his head raised to look at her. Hey! Say something, have you become mute? After Chiu Lily saw him stop, her heart was relieved for no reason. Then she scolded him angrily. Lin Kuei suddenly sat down and his two front limbs stood side by side in front of him. However, he still didn't speak. He just stared at Chiu Lily with an unfathomable gaze. Chiu Lily became more and more confused. She didn't know what was going on with Lin Kuei. He didn't answer her question. Why did he only know how to stare at her? So, the person and the leopard stared at each other silently for a few seconds. Suddenly, the big black panther spoke human language. Lily, do you like me? Chiu Lily's first reaction was to be stunned. When she reacted, she realized what Lin Kuei said. Then, her expression became subtle. At first, she looked at him blankly, but in the next second, her eyes drifted left and right. She didn't dare to look Lin Kuei in the eye. What did you say? She was very embarrassed and awkward. She didn't even dare to look at Lin Kuei's eyes. Lily, I like you. However, at this time, Lin Kuei said again. Chiu Lily was stunned again. Then, she instantly looked at Lin Kuei's eyes. What did you say just now? Are you serious? Lin Kuei stood up, swinging its tail and circling around on the spot. He then looked up at Chiu Lily, who was standing on the rooftop. Then, he bent his forelegs slightly and jumped up. Chiu Lily saw him jump to the rooftop in the blink of an eye. She subconsciously took 2 steps back. She hadn't reacted to his words just now. Lin Kuei walked towards Chiu Lily with elegant steps. Although Chiu Lily wanted to run away, she didn't dare to do so. But she wanted to know what Lin Kuei meant just now. Why did he think that she liked him? And he actually said that he liked her. Usually, she liked to stick with him, but she didn't know whether she liked him or not. Moreover, this big cat's sudden confession caught her off guard. Lin Kuei didn't immediately get close to her. Instead, he began to walk in circles around her. Step by step, his footsteps were rhythmic and unhurried. He said, I know you like me, but do you like me like this? Or like a human? The red light in Chiu Lily's eyes began to shine. If she was a human, she would have blushed at this moment. How do I like you? Lin Kuei's footsteps paused slightly. He said, Really? You really don't like me? If I leave, will you miss me? Chiu Lily was stunned again. What? You want to leave? Where are you going? Can you answer my first question first? Lin Kuei walked up behind her and rubbed his head against her hand beside her. Chiu Lily's whole body trembled. Her hands seemed to be electrified. She stared at him with her eyes wide open. Her expression was a little complicated. Although she didn't want to admit that she liked him in front of him, if she had to say that she didn't like him at all, that was also impossible. But the question was, why did Lin Kuei suddenly ask her such a question? From the moment she saw him, Chiu Lily felt that he was strange. His gaze was strange too. Chapter 1253. What's wrong with you? You don't look right now. Chiu Lily didn't answer Lin Kuei's question immediately. Instead, she turned around to look at him. I'm fine. Very, very fine. Lin Kuei's voice was a little airy. Then he rubbed his head against Chiu Lily's hand, and then his whole body. His body was already very big. In his leopard form, he was about 1.2 meters tall, and he almost reached Chiu Lily's chest. So, when he rubbed against her furry body, the petite Chiu Lily took 2 steps back. Big Cat Lin, are you acting coquettishly now? After being rubbed against by him, Chiu Lily looked at him inexplicably. because kittens would only rub against people's feet like this when they were acting coquettishly. Hearing Chiu Lily's words, Lin Kuei stopped rubbing against her body. Then he used his tail to curl Chiu Lily's long hair behind her back and shook it. He said, "How could I do that kind of thing that only children would do?" He wasn't acting coquettishly now. He was clearly courting her, okay? Hearing his words, Chiu Lily was speechless. She looked back at him and said, "You are." At this time, Lin Kuei turned behind her and suddenly disappeared. Chiu Lily turned her head and wanted to look at him. Then, a pair of strong arms suddenly hugged her shoulders from behind. "Silly, I was clearly confessing just now. Lily, I like you. Do you like me?" After Lin Kuei hugged Chiu Lily with a pair of smooth arms from behind, he pressed his head into the pit of her neck and sniffed her scent. Being hugged by him, Chiu Lily was already shocked and panicked. But when she heard him confess again, her mind became even more chaotic. His mind became even more chaotic. He was happy, helpless, and at a loss. All of a sudden, he didn't know how to react at all. More importantly, Lin Kuei was now hugging her with his naked body. Should she scold him for acting like a hooligan, or should she answer his confession? If she said she didn't like him, it seemed like she was lying to him and herself. If she said she liked him, he suddenly made her panic. And, could he put on his clothes first? "Do you like me? I think, Lily, you must like me because you usually like to be with me. You're obviously a very antisocial little girl. Apart from being a little closer to the leader, you don't seem to be close to anyone. In the end, not only did you spend a lot of time with me, but you also visited my sister often. Lily, just stay with me, okay?" In the end, Lin Kuei suddenly turned Chiu Lily's body to face him and looked at her face affectionately. "Sigh. I'm still young. Don't let me see your human body. I don't want to see it." Chiu Lily was startled by his sudden turn. She subconsciously closed her eyes, pushed his chest with her hands, and turned her face to the other side, not daring to look at him. Although your body is still the same age as before you became a zombie, but your mental age is not young. You're already an adult. Come on, open your eyes and answer me. Lin Kuei pressed her shoulder with one hand and pinched her chin with the other, looking at her little face. His eyes swept over her closed eyes, then from the bridge of her nose, and finally stopped at her cherry-red mouth. Even if my mental age is that of an adult, but my body is still that of a child. Let me think about it. Chiu Lily struggled for a long time, and finally pushed him away and was ready to run away. However, before she could push Lin Kuei away, Lin Kuei had already reacted quickly and grabbed her wrist again. He directly pulled her back into his arms. "Don't run, why do you need to think about it? The facts are in front of you, Lily, look at me." Lin Kuei pulled her back and locked her in his arms, looking down at her and said, if it was the usual Lin Kuei, he would definitely not pull Chiu Lily like this. But today, just like what Chiu Lily said, he was indeed not right. "You let me go." Chiu Lily did not expect him to pull her back in an instant, not even letting her run away. She looked back and saw his strong chest, which was a little pale because he was not angry. She wanted to lower her head to avoid his bare chest, but when she looked down, she accidentally saw something more terrifying. Chiu Lily's whole body stiffened, and she immediately closed her eyes and raised her head. "No, you have to answer my question before you can go." Lin Kuei still grabbed her and did not let go. He looked at her stubbornly and said, "Okay, yeah, I got it. I kind of like you. Is this okay? Can you let me go? Can you put on your clothes first? Is it okay to confess and act like a hooligan at the same time?" Chiu Lily could not stand it anymore, and finally admitted it. In the end, she could not help but complain. However, Lin Kuei did not care about his current appearance at all. After hearing Chiu Lily's answer, he suddenly held her face with both hands, then lowered his head and forcefully blocked Chiu Lily's lips with his own. "Huh?" Chiu Lily felt something strange on her lips and opened her eyes. When she saw Lin Kuei's face pressed against hers, she instantly widened her eyes. Then she reflexively began to struggle. However, Lin Kuei seemed to have anticipated her action. He immediately bent down and tightly held her small waist with both hands. Then, he raised one hand and clasped the back of her head. His tongue stuck out from his lips and went into her small mouth. Chiu Lily was completely frightened by his action, and she slapped his shoulder hard. As a result, her hand touched his smooth skin, which made her even more confused. In a panic, she could not help but want to use her special ability, but she suddenly thought that it might hurt Lin Kuei. Thinking of this, she could not bear to do it, so she hesitated and finally did not use her special ability to attack Lin Kuei. Moreover, Lin Kuei's tongue was stirring wildly in her mouth, rolling her tongue and rubbing together. It made Chiu Lily's lips unable to close, and a silver thread slipped from the corner of her mouth. Chiu Lily even felt that there was something hard on the lower half of Lin Kuei's body that was holding her. It made her a little uncomfortable, so she subconsciously pushed it with her hand. As a result, the feeling was a little strange. It was fleshy and hard, and there was a faint heat. After Chiu Lily suddenly realized what she had touched, her whole body immediately froze. As a result, Lin Kuei took the opportunity and began to touch her. Predict the future. Old rules. Join the group. For 9999113. Chapter 1254. When Chiu Lily woke up, she found herself in Lin Kuei's embrace in leopard form. She was buried under the soft fur of Lin Kuei's belly, and his head was nestled in her neck. Chiu Lily was stunned for 2 seconds, and instantly, some charming scenes flashed through her mind. Her whole body stiffened, and then she moved her legs as if she thought of something. She felt that the lower part of her body didn't feel sticky or dry, and it was refreshing as if it had been cleaned. And Lin Kuei helped her put on her clothes. As soon as she moved, Lin Kuei's leopard eyes opened. He looked up at her and said, "You're awake? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Chiu Lily stared at him for a few seconds, then suddenly pushed him away and sat up. She jumped off the bed and awkwardly pointed at Lin Kuei. "You." She wanted to scold him, but suddenly didn't know what to say. After all, she was the one who agreed to it. Thinking about it, she was a little angry at herself. In the end, she could only take back her hand and stare at him angrily. Seeing that she was angry, Lin Kuei immediately jumped off the bed and looked at her. "What's wrong? Are you angry? Who told you to eat random things? Otherwise, how could this happen?" After saying that, she turned and ran up the stairs, waved her hand, and blew up the exit with a fireball. Then she disappeared in a flash. "Lily!" Before Lin Kuei could react, Chiu Lily had already blown up the door and ran out. He hurriedly chased after her, but Chiu Lily was gone. He could only follow her breath. Lin Kuei knew that Chiu Lily might be emotional after waking up, but he didn't expect her to run away immediately. After a moment of daze, his body automatically reacted and chased after her. Although it was all his fault for eating the grass, he still felt that it was his fault. But he didn't expect the catnip to become an aphrodisiac in his body. But this should be a good discovery, right? Compared to his sexual bliss, yes, it was good. But the drug was a little strong. But he really couldn't resist the smell of the catnip. It was like a heavy smoker who hadn't smoked for a long time and suddenly smelled a cigarette. He couldn't help it at all. After being mesmerized by the smell, he put the catnip in his mouth and ate it for some reason. Fortunately, after eating it, he was inexplicably excited and his lower body was excited. He didn't lose his mind and do other things. But he felt a little guilty for confessing his love and coaxing Chiu Lily to accept him. So how could he let her run away angrily at this time? If she ran away, how could he chase after her? So, he couldn't let her run away now? However, Chiu Lily was a wind and fire elemental. Once she ran out, it would be difficult to catch her. Although Lin Kuei's speed was also very fast, there was a gap when one was flying in the sky while the other was chasing on the ground. Chiu 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 Li and out, Chiu Chiu Kuei Li. Chiu and in Chiu Chiu ran. Chiu Lily calmed down after running far away, and then stopped at the top of a tall building in the city. She stood at the edge and looked at the direction of Lin Kuei's breath. She raised her hands and rubbed her cheeks. She couldn't believe that she did that with Lin Kuei. She couldn't believe that Lin Kuei did that to her. He could even do that to her underage body. Even if he was drugged, he was still conscious, but he didn't care about it. Or maybe he had this kind of juvenile fetish. That's not right. He said that he liked her. Furthermore, he seemed to allow her to stick to him. Whether it was stroking his hair or stroking his head, he didn't seem to resist at all. But she knew that Lin Kuei wouldn't let anyone else touch his head and fur except her and Lin Jing. But looking at him at that time, if she really didn't agree, Lin Kuei wouldn't force himself on her. Lin Kuei probably wouldn't force himself on her, but what if he really lost his mind in the end, just like what he said? What surprised her even more was that the catnip that Lin Wenwen brought back had such an effect. But was it only useful for Lin Kuei, or was it useful for all zombies? She felt that Lin Kuei became like an aphrodisiac. Fortunately, Lin Kuei liked her. Chiu Lily felt a little sweet when she thought that Lin Kuei confessed to her before doing that. Lily! Just as her mind was in a mess, Lin Kuei's Black Panther had already appeared on the side of the same building as her. But he didn't dare to get close and just looked at her from a distance. Chiu Lily turned her head to look at him, and then immediately turned her back to him, not daring to look at him. She didn't know what expression she should use to face him. She was so shy just thinking about it. Lin Kuei stood on the side of the building, more than 10 meters away from Chiu Lily. He watched her put her long hair in front of her chest. He asked hesitantly, "Can I come over?" Chiu Lily didn't answer him, but said with her back to him, "Is there anything else?" The effect of the drug has worn off. Lin Kuei said, "Of course I have something, but I want to make it clear to you face to face." Chiu Lily didn't say anything, and just stood there quietly. "Then I'll come over?" Lin Kuei said tentatively, and then jumped onto the roof and slowly walked towards her. Chiu Lily felt him coming closer, so she turned to face him. "What else do you want to say?" Lin Kuei walked to her, and smelled his scent on her body. He wagged his long tail happily. "Are you still mad at me?" He looked up at her eyes and asked her. Chiu Lily shook her head. "I'm not." "Then why did you run?" "You scared me." Lin Kuei was speechless. "I'm just mad at myself. I actually listened to you." "You will take responsibility for me, right?" Chiu Lily said angrily, and then stared at Lin Kuei. Lin Kuei smiled, and the beard on both sides of his mouth was slanted. He lowered his head and rubbed her belly. "I will definitely take responsibility for you, unless you don't want me anymore. Even if you don't want me anymore, I don't want to let go of you." Chiu Lily pushed his head away and said with some disbelief, "You men make it sound nice, but I don't know if you will have a change of heart in the future." After saying that, she turned her head and looked to the other side, not wanting to look at him. Lin Kuei immediately turned to the other side, looked at her, and said, "That's impossible. I won't have a change of heart. I swear." With that, he sat down, and then raised a paw to his ear, looking at her like a lucky cat. Chapter 12:55. Chiu Lily was amused by his cute look, then she said angrily, "Who knows what will happen in the future? Don't be too sure." Lin Kuei saw that acting cute didn't work, so he could only put down his claws. Then he moved closer to her and said, "I will only put you in my heart in the future. What do you want me to say to make you believe me? Besides, we are already like this. Do you still want to leave me?" Chiu Lily looked at him with a conflicted expression, but she had already begun to give up resisting. Lin Kuei hooked her hand with his furry tail and said, "Promise me, okay? Don't leave me, Lily." Just promise him." "Chiu Lily, aren't you usually very straightforward? Why are you so hesitant now?" "I'm getting anxious." At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the side. The two of them turned their heads and saw a head popping out from another building in the distance. Elmar looked at the two of them with a gloomy expression, as if the eunuch was anxious even though the emperor was not anxious. "When did you come?" After seeing Elmar, Chiu Lily was shocked and immediately blurted out. Lin Kuei turned around and sat next to Chiu Lily in the direction of Elmarch. He said, "Oh, she has been here for a while." "Ah, can you sense me? I am invisible." Seeing Lin Kuei's calm reaction, Elmar looked at him in surprise. As long as she was invisible now, no one could sense her. Could it be that Lin Kuei had some special skills that could sense her presence? Maybe it's because we both have the same type of ability? I seem to be able to feel a little bit, but it's a little vague. Lin Kuei raised a paw and wiped his leopard face. Both of them were natural animals, like the intuition between animals. In fact, he wasn't sure who was hiding nearby, but he could vaguely feel it. After all, the other party didn't reveal any aggressive hostility, so he didn't bother. After all, his wife was more important now. Elmar moved closer to Chiu Lily and sniffed at her. Then, she pinched her nose and took a step back with a look of disgust. Hey, your body is full of the smell of this black leopard. Speaking of which, you guys actually developed to this point? It's amazing. Then he continued, speaking of which, the two of you are already in such a relationship. Why are you still fighting? Lin Kuei raised a paw and made a reporting gesture. It's not me, it's her. After saying that, he pointed his claw at Chiu Lily. Chiu Lily angrily slapped his hand away, looked at Elmar and said, "This is our business. What are you doing here?" Elmar shrugged and crossed her arms in front of her chest. It's obvious. They're here to watch the show. It's just that I'm anxious, so I came out to interrupt. Ha ha ha. Actually, when she saw Chiu Lily's hesitant look just now, she didn't know what was bothering her. Therefore, in a moment of panic, he came out to cause trouble. Moreover, seeing that Lin Kuei was about to carry Chiu Lily home, she couldn't stand the sight of him. However, since he was serious and seemed to treat Chiu Lily well before, Zhang Heng couldn't help it. And Chiu Lily seemed to like being by his side, although Elmar was a little jealous. However, he had to admit that helping others achieve their goals was also a good thing. I think you're here to cause trouble. Chiu Lily knew her personality very well, so she rolled her eyes. But after being interrupted by her, her nervous and chaotic mood slowly calmed down. Glancing at Lin Kuei, who was sitting next to her, Chiu Lily felt very happy. At this time, Elmar asked again, "But I'm very curious. Lin Kuei, you've become a zombie. You can still feel it? If it wasn't for Lily's smell, I really can't believe what you guys did." Lin Kuei was a little embarrassed when she asked this kind of question so blatantly. Fortunately, he was now in the image of a Black Panther, so it wasn't very obvious. It was just that his eyes were a little drifting. Ahem. What's wrong? Do you want to try it too? But I can't guarantee that it will work on you. After all, it only worked on felines before. But he still pretended to be calm and answered Elmarch. Felines? Elmar didn't know about the catnip, so she was stunned and looked at the two of them with a puzzled look. But in the next second, she felt something was wrong. Hey, no, bah. I don't need it. Chiu Lily looked at her. Okay, are you done watching the show? Can we go now? We haven't finished talking about our business yet. Elmar looked at her and then looked at Lin Kuei. She said with a speechless expression, "Do you still want to say it? The result is already out, right? Look at how close you are now. I say, hurry back to see your parents." After saying that, she turned and flashed down the stairs and disappeared. Hearing her words, Chiu Lily turned back to look at Lin Kuei, who was next to her. She saw that he was quietly next to her, but she didn't care about his existence as much as before. The two seemed to have returned to the previous state of sticking together, but now there was a more intimate relationship between them. Lin Kuei was a little concerned about Elmar's last sentence. He looked at Chiu Lily. "Although you have already seen my sister, I still want to reintroduce you to her as my girlfriend." Chiu Lily felt that her face seemed to be hot, but she didn't know if it was an illusion. She immediately turned her face away and said, "Isn't this too fast?" Lin Kuei's eyes lit up, then he squinted his leopard eyes, stroked his beard and smiled. "You agree? If you think it's too fast now, we can go in a few days." Chiu Lily immediately refuted him. "Hey, I haven't agreed yet." Lin Kuei squinted his leopard face and smiled, revealing his sharp teeth. "Then tell me, when can we go?" He directly ignored Chiu Lily's rebuttal. He knew that she was just shy, so he didn't take it seriously. "Let me think about it first." Chiu Lily glared at him angrily, then turned around and leaped into the sky, flying back to the base. Lin Kuei looked at her disappearing figure, then jumped down from the roof and followed her back. Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue stayed in Huaxia for a night. The next day, people from Huaxia came to inform them to go to the reception hall to meet the leaders of the various bases. Even Xikong Chen, Lin Xiao, and Lan Lu, who had just met and fought with them not long ago, greeted them calmly. It was as if nothing had happened in the northwest. All three parties acted as if nothing had happened. Xikong Chen distributed a set of documents to the leaders of the various bases. He sat at the head of the table and said, "This is the information and research report on the underworld creatures that we've collected. Basically, we've presented everything we know." Lin Xiao and the others took the document and looked at it carefully. They found that the content was very detailed. Chapter 1256. On the information given by Huaxia, the appearance, body shape, strength, and attributes of those creatures were clearly written. He also wrote down the common characteristics and the impact of harm. However, he didn't write down what everyone really wanted to know. But China's research and technology has always been the most advanced among the major bases. Haven't you guys figured out a way to deal with these things? Wu Qingyue asked Xikong Chen with a smile after quickly looking through the documents. Xikong Chen looked at him expressionlessly and replied, "I also want to know the answer to this question, but even if there are many scientific researchers in my base, they still need some time. According to the current research progress, it's still a little more difficult." Wu Qingyue smiled and said, "Oh, really? Since you've already done the research, it's impossible that you don't have any ideas, right? I'm sure Leader Xikong already has some plans in mind, right?" Xikong Chen looked at him calmly and said, "I do have some plans, but I've already done experiments. There weren't any good results, so I gave up and wanted to hear everyone's opinions. Since Leader Wu said so, it seems that Leader Wu should have a good method, right? If I do, of course I don't mind sharing it with everyone. Unfortunately, I don't have this ability. Even Huaxia, with such good personnel and technology, can't think of it. How can I think of it?" Wu Qingyue still smiled calmly and spread out his hands. The first meeting was filled with probing, so they wouldn't get any useful information. However, since Huaxia had already taken out their research information, the major bases didn't hide it either. During the meeting, they also took out the information on the underground creatures that appeared in their respective areas. Basically, the information on the surface was similar to what they had collected themselves. "I think, since these things are coming out from the ground, why don't we send an expedition team to the underground to investigate? See what might be discovered that would be crucial? These things wouldn't come out for no reason, right? There must be a reason. If we can figure out the reason, can we think of a way to stop them from wreaking havoc on the surface?" Lan Lu looked at the pile of information on the underground creatures in his hands and suddenly said. Du Quinsheng clapped his hands and said, "That's right, I also have this idea. However, it won't be easy to choose who to send down. After all, we don't know what the situation underground is like." When Lin Xiao heard this, he said, "It's definitely dangerous. My deputy chief only went down for less than a kilometer and has already collapsed. Those who are weak don't need to go down, because they won't be of any use, and will even drag us down." Du Quinsheng nodded in agreement and said, "That's right. If we're going down, of course we should send some stronger people down. At the very least, everyone should have the ability to protect themselves." Although that was what they said, there were only so few people with real strength, and almost all of them were the leaders of their respective bases. Places like Haiqing, which had many people in charge, were fine. But places like Universal Life Base, Qingshan Base, Black Dragon Base, and Mongol Tribe only had 1 or 2 level 7 adepts. If they didn't go down, they wouldn't be able to send out strong people, and if they went down, they would lack a strong person to take charge of the situation. For such a dangerous mission, the person must be at least a level 6 arcanist. If a level 5 person went down and encountered a situation, they might not be able to do anything due to their lack of strength. It was even more likely to cause unnecessary trouble. So for such an important mission, it was impossible to only send people from one base. The major bases would send people to form an exploration team, and it would be more balanced. Wu Qingyue still had a faint smile on his face as he looked at Sikongchen. What does leader Sikong think? Sikongchen nodded with a straight face. Of course I have no opinion. In that case, it will take a few days for the manpower to prepare, and the meeting can only wait for them to complete the mission before discussing further. Wu Qingyue said with a smile. That's the only way. I have no opinion. What do you all think? Lan Lu said aloud, his eyes sweeping across everyone's faces. I have no opinion, but we still need to consider the candidates to prepare the manpower. Du Kuanxing said. He did not have enough manpower. After all, he was the only level 7 arcanist in Black Dragon Base, and there weren't many level 6 arcanists. If he didn't go down, he could only send 2 level 6 arcanists. In terms of the strength of the base, Haiqing was slightly weaker than Huaxia, but it was much stronger than the other bases. Then let's do it this way. We will first choose a place to enter the cave. After 3 days, let the people you send go down from there, and see the results before making a decision. Sikongchen suggested at this time. Everyone had no objections, they all nodded and said, no problem, but now we want to enter the underground cave. Do you all have a suitable location? Since everyone is going to send people together, why don't we first go in the central region? I know of a very deep cave at the northern border of Xiang province. Let's see if we can find anything at the bottom of the cave. Wu Qingyue's first suggestion was the central region. There was indeed a very big cave there, and the underground creatures that appeared were very large. If a large creature moved underground, it would definitely leave behind a wide passageway. So it would be more convenient for humans to go down. I have no opinion, let it be in the central region. Anyway, there are cave marks left by the underground creatures everywhere, it doesn't matter where we go down. Lan Lu expressed his agreement with Wu Qingyue's suggestion. Anyway, if everyone sent people to gather in the middle, it would be very fair. I have no opinion. Du Kuanxing nodded. Lin Xiao looked at Sikongchen and smiled. I agree. Sikongchen saw her look at him, then looked at the others. 3 people had already expressed their agreement. Even if he wanted to object, not only would it be useless, it would also affect the others' attitude towards him. So he could only nod. Then everyone looked at the last level 7 arcanist, Bao Qingji of the Meng tribe base, waiting for his opinion. Ah, you all have agreed, how can I object? Of course I have no opinion. Bao Qingji saw everyone looking at him, he immediately smiled and said. Wu Qingyue smiled and said, since everyone has agreed, then I will mark the location and send it to you later. So everyone dismissed the meeting and went back to arrange their own people. Chapter 1257. What's wrong? Has the plan changed again? After the meeting, Xie Longyun received the news and immediately came to find Sikongchen. Sikongchen sat at his desk with a paralyzed face and said calmly, if they want to go underground to scout, then let them go. Wu Qingyue and that woman will definitely go down. We'll change the plan. When the time comes, you just need to find an opportunity to make a move so they can't come up. Sikongchen's consideration was that Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue were both level 8 ability users. Their 2 bases were almost one. So between the 2 level 8 ability users, one of them would definitely go down. This was to ensure the success rate of this mission. What? You want me to go down? I've already met that woman. She will only be wary of me. What can I do? Xie Longyun heard his arrangement and immediately frowned with some dissatisfaction. If that woman goes down, you just need to find an opportunity to explode the potion within 5 meters of her. It will be effective on her. With your ability, even if you don't get close to her, it shouldn't be difficult for you to throw something over. Sikongchen looked at her calmly. His tone was calm, as if everything was in his control. After listening to his words, Xie Longyun fell into deep thought. She said, if it's like what you said, I can do it. Also, I will let Lu Jinan go down with you. With his cooperation, you should be able to get twice the result with half the effort. Sikongchen put his hand on the table and tapped lightly. After thinking for a while, Xie Longyun nodded and said, okay then. I got it. At this time, someone came to the door. The person knocked on the door and walked in. Oh, beauty Xia is here too. Xia Longyun saw that she had finished talking with Si Kongqin, so she turned around and walked out. I'm done. You guys do as you please. After the two of them watched her figure disappear outside the door, Wei Haichao handed over the newly obtained information to Si Kongqin. He said, I found something in Haiqing. Si Kongqin took the information and asked, what is it? Haiqing currently doesn't have a situation where crops are grown, but they still provide fresh ingredients every day. He just didn't know where these fresh ingredients came from. However, according to my deductions, Ocean City has a close relationship with the Universal Life Base. Moreover, our people haven't been able to sneak into the Universal Life Base. I feel that this point is suspicious. There is some secret in this base that can change the situation of the land. Wei Haichao handed over the information to him and explained the situation. Could it be that the secret that Ocean City said could purify the land isn't their own, but something that only exists in this base? Si Kongqin looked at the information in his hand with a curious expression. Not only did the information state that the plantation base in Sea City was still in a state of being unable to grow, but it also stated the number of fresh dishes provided in the canteens in Sea City every day. It was even written that Sea City would receive a batch of supplies from the Universal Base every week. However, the contents of these materials had not been found out. Sea City was very secretive in this aspect. The intelligence on this base has always been difficult to obtain, and it seems to have a close relationship with Sea City. I feel that this woman's base is becoming more and more mysterious. Wei Haichao looked very interested in the Universal Life Base, his eyes flashing with an unknown light. Si Kongqin knew what he was thinking when he saw his expression and nodded. Since you're so interested, then go and do it. While that woman doesn't have time to care about her base, take a few level 6 ability users to investigate. Perhaps there were very few level 6 ability users in other bases, but in Huaxia, there were a lot of them. That was why Si Kongqin casually asked him to take out a few level 6 ability users. After all, he had spent a lot of resources to train a number of level 5 and 6 ability users for use. Understood. Wei Haichao nodded. On the other side, when Lin Xiao returned to her room, Wu Qingyue and Lan Lu followed her. She walked to the door and stopped, turned to look at the two behind her and asked, What's the matter? Your room is over there. The two men looked at each other and turned to nod at her at the same time. Lin Xiao could only invite the two into the room and sit down. She looked at Lan Lu curiously and asked, Why did you suddenly think of sending people down to investigate the situation? Did you find something on your side? Wu Qingyue also turned to look at Lan Lu when he heard what she said. Lin Xiao might be right. Lan Lu must have found something. That's why he made this suggestion in front of everyone. You're really not simple. You can actually guess what I found. Lan Lu smiled and looked at Lin Xiao, then reached into a hidden pocket of his coat and took out a piece of paper and handed it to the two of them. What's the situation? Wu Qingyue reached out and took a look. Lan Lu leaned on the chair and said, I sent people down to investigate, but they didn't dare to go too deep. They did find something interesting. Before he finished, Wu Qingyue looked at the contents of the paper and said, Underground space? Did your people go more than 3,000 meters down? Lan Lu said, The underground space is just my guess. My people didn't find that place. But from what they observed, it seems that there is indeed a world that we don't know about underground. Wu Qingyue looked down at the information on the paper again and said, There is a strong airflow at such a depth of more than 3,000 meters. It seems that there is indeed a spacious place underground. But what are these plants? Lan Lu said, Yes, it's because of these strange plants that I can be sure that there is a very large space underground. But my men have collected too few of these plants, so we can't tell what it's like underground. Lin Xiao looked at him and asked in confusion, You didn't continue to send people down to investigate? Lan Lu's expression was somewhat heavy as he replied, My men were only halfway down when they encountered something very powerful blocking their way. Only 2 of the people who went down came back. You're saying that there is a space underground that we don't know about, and there are some monsters that are similar to the ones on the surface? Lin Xiao followed his information and came to this conclusion. No, the things underground are stronger than the ones on the surface. But there don't seem to be many of them, and if we encounter one, we won't be able to return. Lan Lu shook his head and explained. Number of individuals? Lin Xiao inexplicably thought of the big red cat. Although there was only one, its strength was not inferior to that of a level 7 mutated beast. It was also a very powerful existence, but it was a vegetarian, which was very puzzling. Chapter 1258. That's right. The 3 times my men encountered them underground, they were all alone, unlike the ones that appeared on the surface in a group. But even if it's just one, it's at least rank 7. Lan Lu nodded with a serious expression. His words made the other 2 look at each other, and their expressions also sank. They didn't expect to encounter rank 7 and above 3 times, and they didn't even encounter them in the deepest part of the underground. That meant that the deeper they went, the more powerful they might encounter. They might even encounter rank 8 or even rank 9 beasts. If they sent people down like this, it was very likely that they wouldn't be able to return. It was too dangerous. So I think the people who are going down this time can't be lower than rank 6. Think about the candidates carefully. Even if you choose rank 6 beasts, it's best to choose someone with special life-saving skills. Lan Lu thought about it and gave them a suggestion. Lin Xiao thought about Yuan Tianxing's situation and suddenly said, in addition to powerful and aggressive exotic beasts, there might also be some natural traps such as poisonous gases or liquids. Wu Chengyue spread his hands and said, it's better to have at least one rank 8 ability user lead the team. But there are only 4 rank 8 ability users right now. Do you think there's any way for Xikong Chen to personally lead the team down? There were already 3 out of the 4 level 8 experts here, so it was impossible for Xikong Chen to personally go down. He wasn't such a stupid person, so he wouldn't let his base be placed in front of the other 3 without his supervision. Because no matter how you looked at the current situation, Lan Lu, Lin Xiao, and Wu Chengyue were on the same side. There were so many secrets in Huaxia, and if he didn't personally look after them, they might not be able to keep them. If he didn't personally look after them, they might not be able to keep them. He definitely won't go down no matter what. For him, the most important thing isn't the scouting mission, nor the discussion meeting after the mission ends. It's the plan he's plotting. Lin Xiao sneered and said what Xikong Chen was thinking. Lan Lu looked at her and asked curiously, do you know what he's plotting? Lin Xiao said to him, I think his plan is only targeted at me or Wu Chengyue. It has nothing to do with you guys for now. After meeting Xikong Chen today, even if Lin Xiao couldn't sense his true thoughts, he would still be able to sense it. But just from his gaze, she could feel that Xikong Chen had done something behind the scenes during this conference. Moreover, she could feel that the other party was coming for her or Wu Chengyue. Wu Chengyue looked at her with a smile and said, no matter what his plan is, we have nothing to fear. As the saying goes, counter soldiers with arms and water with earth. If Xikong Chen dared to make a move, then they would just have to wait and receive it. Lan Lu smiled and said, Great leader Wu is very confident in dealing with Xikong Chen. Looks like you've already made some preparations. Wu Chengyue smiled back. Of course, Xikong Chen's intentions are too obvious. We still have some basic precautions. So, apart from the underground discovery, is there anything else, Leader Lan? That's all. Lan Lu was stunned when he heard the last sentence. Then he realized that Wu Chengyue was chasing him away. After thinking for a bit, he said, but since Xikong Chen isn't willing to go down, then among the 3 of us, who do you think is the most suitable candidate? Blue Land wasn't a combat type ability, and his psychic abilities might be useful for scouting underground. But compared to Lin Xiao, his ability was a bit weaker. Moreover, his body was relatively weak. If he encountered those creatures that were immune to abilities, even if he had spirit-type abilities, he wouldn't be able to attack them. Instead, he wouldn't even be able to run away. I'm a spirit type. You guys know that my skills are too weak. I probably won't be able to protect the entire team if I go down, so don't look at me. He spread his hands and said straightforwardly. Wu Chengyue looked at him and then at Lin Xiao. According to what he said, the 3 of them felt that Lin Xiao was the most suitable. because she was a zombie and her ability was fire and poison. Also, she had space and a lot of protective abilities. If it was Wu Qingyue, his skills weren't weak, but the destructive power of the lightning element was too strong. If they weren't careful during the battle, they would be buried together with the underworld creatures. Lin Xiao saw the two men staring at him at the same time and said indifferently, "I don't care. I also want to see if there is really a space that we can't imagine like you said." She really wanted to know what made these underground creatures come out of the ground. Hearing Lan Lu's words, Lin Xiao also felt that this underground space really existed. Otherwise, how could there be so many monsters? It seemed that the creatures that came out of the ground couldn't grow to such a scale in a short period of time. Lan Lu smiled, but Wu Qingyue showed a slightly conflicted expression. "What? Are you worried about Miss Lu's safety? I think her self-protection skills are much better than yours, so the chances of her coming back alive are higher than the two of us." Lan Lu saw that Wu Qingyue's smile had faded, so he joked with him. From the big picture, exploring the underground situation and bringing back information was the most important thing. Therefore, as the leaders of two bases, Wu Qingyue and Lin Xiao would usually think about the big picture. However, Wu Qingyue was a bit of a male chauvinist and felt that letting his woman go would make him unhappy. But Lan Lu was right. In fact, Lin Xiao was the most suitable person to go down. Thinking about it, if she didn't go down, then when he went down, she might have to face Xikong Chen's conspiracy, so it wouldn't be safe either. Lin Xiao was very confident in staying alive. After all, she had the zombie body and space as her trump cards. This body was many times more dangerous than a human's body, and it was also much stronger than a human's body. In addition, her skills and perception were even comparable to a peak level 8 metahuman. As long as she didn't face a level 9 mutated beast, she felt that nothing could kill her. Of course, there were still a lot of dangers. She didn't rule out the possibility that there might be some unknown things underground that might affect her zombie body. Seeing that Lin Xiao had already decided, Wu Qingyue could only let her go. He turned his head to look at Lan Lu and asked again, "Okay, is there anything else?" Seeing that this was the second time he wanted to drive him away, Lan Lu looked at him and smiled meaningfully. But this time, he didn't continue to stay, stood up and walked out. "Okay, then that's it for now." After saying that, he walked out. After seeing him leave, Wu Qingyue's mood slightly relaxed. He turned his head and was about to say something to Lin Xiao, but at this time, Duan appeared at the door again. "Ahem, although I'm sorry to disturb you now, there is new information from the base." "But there is new information from the base." Duan knocked on the door and looked at the two of them with a smile. "Wu Qingyue." Chapter 1259. Seeing Wu Qingyue's darkened face, Duan walked in with a smile. "News from the base? What's going on?" Lin Xiao looked at her in confusion. Anything that could be sent from the all-life base at this time was definitely urgent information. Could it be that something happened in the base? Hearing Duan's words, Wu Qingyue could only sigh and sit down to listen to their conversation. Since Lin Xiao didn't chase him out, it meant that he could listen to their conversation. "Good news. Wenwen is back." Duan smiled and said to Lin Xiao. Hearing this, Lin Xiao immediately revealed a happy expression. "Oh, really? How's her situation?" "Seems to be fine. I heard that her second ability has been successfully promoted. Also, her space has expanded a lot and she brought back a lot of good stuff." Duan said as she pointed at the letter in her hand. There were some things that she couldn't say directly. Lin Xiao took a look. It would have been better if she didn't read it. She cried out in surprise and her eyes revealed an expression of disbelief. "Huh? No way. Is this true?" The letter was written by Lin Feng. Not only did Lin Wenwen return safely, it also explained the reason why she disappeared. She also explained the reason why she disappeared, saying that she didn't run into her own space when she disappeared. Instead, she transmigrated back to 7 years ago. Lin Xiao was a little confused. Is this true or false? She still has this ability? Duan looked at her expression with interest and said with a smile, "Yes, Otherwise, how could she bring back so many things? And they are very important. The more Lin Xiao read, the more her expression changed. In the end, it became an expression of disbelief. In the letter, it said that Lin Wenwen disappeared 7 years ago and that she stayed in a peaceful society before the apocalypse for 3 months. Not only did she bring back a lot of resources that hadn't expired, but she also brought back 500 kilograms of fresh catnip and seeds. How did she know this? Seeing that Lin Wenwen brought back so many catnip, Lin Xiao couldn't help but ask in surprise. Don't forget what her new ability is. She probably saw something. Duan Wan smiled. What did she bring back? Where has she been missing these days? After seeing her reaction, Wu Qingyue was very curious. Lin Xiao glanced at him and said, "She went to a place that you can't imagine." "What place can't I think of? What did she bring to make you so excited?" Wu Qingyue looked at her and asked with a smile. After Lin Xiao finished reading it, a black flame appeared on his hand and engulfed the piece of paper. She looked at Wu Qingyue and said, "It's good stuff, but I don't know if it can be completed in 3 days and delivered to me." Wu Qingyue was confused by her words and didn't know what they were talking about. What Lin Xiao was thinking was that even if Lin Wenwen sent the non-infected catnip to Haiqing probably wouldn't be able to produce the special bullets immediately. After all, the catnip still needed to be broken down and tested for its power and effect. Even if they had 3 days to work nonstop, they still didn't have enough time. But it wasn't impossible. Hurry up and send someone back to ask Xiao Yunlong to speed up the production this time. If he can bring it back before I go down, I can try the effect of the actual combat. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Qingyue and said aloud. If the effect was good, then their action this time would be less hindered. Wu Qingyue looked at her blankly. Speed up the production this time? What is it? Let's talk somewhere else. Lin Xiao stood up and walked to Wu Qingyue's side, directly pulled him up, and then took him into the space. After Duan Wan saw them disappear in the room, she sat quietly in the room and waited. Wu Qingyue was pulled into the space by Lin Xiao and appeared in the living room of the small building. Wu Welling was sitting on the sofa playing with little Tingting. When she saw the two come in, she immediately cheered. "Papa, Mama, do you have time to come in?" Little Tingting was small, but his voice was the loudest. "Daddy." Although Wu Welling spoke, her voice was not loud. When Wu Qingyue saw the two children, his mood immediately became better. He went over to pick up little Tingting and sat beside Wu Yueling. He smiled and looked left and right at little Tingting, then right at Wu Yueling and said, "You miss Daddy so soon?" "I don't, but I'm happy to see you come in." Little Tingting shook his head and said with a smile. Lin Xiao glanced at them, then walked out of the door to take a look. She did not see Lu Tianyi in the crop fields in front of the building. She went to the back of the small building and saw that he was competing with the big ducks and geese again. She watched him grab a big white goose on his left and a big yellow duck on his right. He was pulling them apart, but the two fowls were flapping their wings and stretching their heads to bite each other. "Goose, goose, quack, quack, quack." Lu Tianyi stood there holding the two with a black face, and there were a few duck feathers and goose feathers stuck to his face and head. "I say, what are you doing?" Lin Xiao looked at him amusedly. Lu Tianyi separated his hands and walked to the iron cage on one side. He threw one in, then walked to the iron cage on the other side and threw the other in. Then, he clapped his hands and took off the feathers on his face. "These two are male, and they don't like each other. I don't know why they can always open the iron gate and run together to fight," he said with a tired expression. Lin Xiao looked at him with a feather hanging on his ear and couldn't help but laugh. "So you have to stop them from fighting often?" Lu Tianyi raised his hand to touch the last feather on his ear and rolled his eyes at her. "What else? Let the two of them fly to the front and ruin my vegetable field?" Lin Xiao was speechless and could only turn around to go back to the living room. She went to touch her son who was lying in Wu Qinyue's arms and said to him, "Your intuition is very accurate. Your Aunt Wenwen is back. And she brought back the medicine that should be able to cure Yuan Tianqing. If she remembered correctly, the catnip juice might be able to cure the destructive energy in Yuan Tianqing's body. She just didn't know how the effect would be, but she knew that the new catnip would be very powerful." "Really? Where did Aunt go? Little Tingting looked at her in surprise, his big eyes shining with curiosity. Wu Qingyue also looked at her curiously. The expressions of the father and son were miraculously the same. Two pairs of eyes that looked similar stared at her. Lin Xiao's heart instantly felt like it was lightly brushed by a feather, and a strange and subtle feeling arose. It was slightly itchy, slightly warm, and slightly sweet. Chapter 1260. Lin Xiao walked over and sat on the sofa next to her. She went back 7 years, and she even brought back pure catnip. Wu Qingyue, Tingting, and Wu Yueling all stared at her with wide eyes. What do you mean? Wu Qingyue looked at her blankly, not understanding what she meant. Little Ting and Wu Yueling were even more at a loss. Little Ting thought that it was impossible, but Wu Yueling didn't quite understand what it meant to go back to 7 years ago. Wu Qingyue did understand what she meant, but that wasn't possible, right? So he looked at Lin Xiao in confusion. Lin Xiao spread his hands and said to him, I don't know about her either, but Lin Feng said that she could only bring back a large amount of pure catnip 7 years ago. She has already sent a portion of the grass to High City. That's why I asked you to send someone to speed up the process and bring a few samples over for me to test. Wu Qinyue's willpower was still very strong. He quickly regained his composure, but his eyes were still flickering as he looked at Lin Xiao. So you're saying that she's gone back to the past? He looked at her doubtfully. Lin Xiao believed that he wouldn't tell anyone about this, so she told him directly. Seeing that he still didn't believe it, but he had no choice but to believe it, he laughed and said, What? You don't believe me? That's true, this kind of thing is really hard to believe. But catnip, just send someone back and you'll get the news immediately. Wu Qingyue looked at her for a long time before he nodded. It's not that I don't believe you. It's just that I can't accept it. But with a precedent like you, your sister's situation might be true. Lin Xiao was stunned when she heard that. Then, she suddenly thought, oh right, she was reborn in someone else's body? Although he didn't know what her reason was, since Lin Wenwen had the ability to predict the future, it wasn't impossible for him to travel back. She had actually forgotten about her own situation for a moment. It seemed that she had already gotten used to Lu Tianyu's body. Little Teng looked at Lin Xiao with a look of sudden realization. He opened his mouth slightly and said, Oh, so, did little Aunt go back to the past? So powerful? No wonder I felt that nothing would happen to her. She just crossed over. But she could actually bring something back from there? It turns out that her space can be used over there. This skill was great. To be able to bring something from 7 years ago into the future, that was amazing. It's hard to imagine that she was in such a situation. It seemed that not only could she use her space, but she could also use her foresight ability. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought catnip back, Lin Xiao said. I'll ask Li Qing to send someone to inform the base later. Wu Qingyue nodded. Just as Lin Xiao reached the catnip, she suddenly thought of something. She squinted her eyes to sense the outside and found that Duan had not left. He immediately stood up and disappeared in front of Wu Qingyue, his father and daughter. Wu Qingyue and little Tingting were confused by her actions. They didn't know why she suddenly went out without saying a word. After Lin Xiao came out, he immediately asked Duan, did Lin Feng send the things over? Seeing her come out, Duan smiled and stood up. He nodded to her and said, That's right. With that said, she raised her hand and handed her a bag of catnip that was simply wrapped in a shopping bag. In fact, she had been carrying it when she came in, but Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue didn't notice. As expected, Lin Xiao happily took it and then disappeared in front of Duan. After Duan gave the things to her, she turned around and left Lin Xiao's house. Wu Qingyue and little Tingting happened to see Lin Xiao suddenly disappear, but she came back after a while. She was also carrying a bag in her hand. They didn't know what was in the bag. What is it? Seeing Lin Xiao come back, Wu Qingyue noticed the bag in her hand. The thing to save Yuan Tianxing. Lin Xiao said as she put down the bag, then opened it and took out the catnip inside. Then she found a bowl and poured some water into it. She directly crushed the catnip in her hand into the bowl, stirred it a few times, and put it on the table. Then, she turned around and walked out of the living room. What is she going to do? Wu Qingyue looked at the bowl that Lin Xiao put on the table, then looked at her back. What else can she do? Didn't Mommy just say that this is the thing to save Uncle Yuan? Now, of course, she is going to get Uncle Yuan out of the lake. Little Tingting said as he rolled his eyes at his father. Wu Qingyue then remembered that Lin Xiao had put Yuan Tianxing in her own spatial lake to suppress him. Tianny, help me prepare a bathrobe or a big bath towel. After Lin Xiao came out, she suddenly said to Lu Tianny, who happened to pass by. After arriving at the lake, she waved her black fog, took off her clothes, and jumped into the water. Lu Tianny stopped and looked at Lin Xiao's figure in the lake. He could only helplessly turn around and go into the building to prepare a bathrobe for her. After a while, Lin Xiao brought Yuan Tianxing out of the black fog and threw the naked Yuan Tianxing out of the black fog to Lu Tianny, who was already waiting by the lake. Lu Tianny calmly took the bathrobe and rolled Yuan Tianxing up. Then she carried him in a princess carry and walked towards the small building. After Lin Xiao came in with her clothes on, she saw that Yuan Tianxing was already lying on the long sofa. Lu Tianny stood by the side with little Tingting in his arms. Wu Qingyue crossed his arms and stared at Yuan Tianxing silently. Meanwhile, Xiao Lingling was glued to his leg, staring fearfully at Yuan Tianxing, whose entire body had turned purple. After all, Yuan Tianxing's current appearance was indeed a little scary. Wu Qingyue looked at Yuan Tianxing and couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He looked at Lin Xiao with some dissatisfaction. Speaking of which, you lecherous person, when will you stop taking off your clothes? Or when will you be able to use the energy in the lake on the shore? It's not good to always take off, like this, isn't it? Lin Xiao calmly glanced at him. Still not used to it? I don't mind. Why would you mind? Of course I mind, okay? The smile on Wu Qingyue's face disappeared as he looked at her expressionlessly. How could he not mind? Although he knew about her condition before, he could still persuade himself not to mind it too much until he saw it. However, when he saw her bring the naked Yuan Tianxing out of the water, he thought about how Lin Xiao was also naked. Although he knew that this was just an objective reason, he still minded it a lot. Besides, with her strange treatment method, it was normal for him to mind other people touching her body. He thought about how the body of the woman he liked was seen and even touched by others. He felt uncomfortable, extremely uncomfortable. Chapter 1261. Lin Xiao looked at him speechlessly and picked up the bowl of medicine that she had just crushed the catnip to make. After the catnip was crushed by Lin Xiao, a lot of juice was dissolved in the water, so this half a bowl of water already contained a large amount of pure catnip juice. She brought the bowl to Yuan Tianxing and began to pour the medicine into Yuan Tianxing seriously while answering Wu Qingyue's question, "What can I do about it?" It's an unavoidable factor. As soon as you enter the water, the clothes on your body will automatically disintegrate and disappear. There's nothing I can do to stop it. She slowly poured the dregs of the medicine into Yuan Tianxing's mouth. After that, Lin Xiao began to stare at the changes in Yuan Tianxing's body with narrowed eyes. Wu Qingyue was speechless when he heard her words and could only shut his mouth and look at her gloomily. Lu Tianny and the two children's gazes were on Yuan Tianxing's body like Lin Xiao, especially little Tingting's two bright eyes, which were staring thoughtfully at Yuan Tianxing's chest. At this time, Yuan Tianxing was suppressed by the energy in the lake by Lin Xiao, but the purple color on his body was strangely emitting a faint green light. It was a very faint layer of green halo, but now this green halo was slowly being diluted by the purple destructive energy. Lin Xiao knew that this was because he stayed at the bottom of the lake for a long time, and a small part of the lake's energy was left in his body. Now that he left the lake, without the suppression of the entire lake's energy, the destructive energy in his body immediately began to counterattack, causing the green energy to gradually fade. Now that Lin Xiao had poured the catnip into his mouth, another rich green energy began to emerge from his stomach, and then it began to compete with the purple energy around him. This energy was hundreds of times richer than the catnip juice that Lin Xiao got from Lung Xiantong last time. After competing with the purple energy in his body, there was immediately an obvious effect. Hey, it works. Lin Xiao's face revealed a joyful expression, and his eyes lit up slightly. Little Ting Ting also nodded at this time. Yes, it works. Lin Xiao heard him and turned to look at him, then asked him with some doubt, Hey, Little Ting Ting, you can see it too? Little Ting Ting shook his head at her. Ah? I can't see it, but I can smell it. My nose is very powerful. Furthermore, by smelling the changes in the aura, I can tell how strong it is. Lin Xiao, Wu Qingyue, and even Lu Tianyi looked at him in amazement, as if they were looking at a treasure. Little Ting Ting, you have this skill? You're amazing. Lu Tianyi pinched his soft little face. Lin Xiao lowered his head and continued to observe Yuan Tianxing's condition. The green energy in his body was slowly expanding, and this time, the green energy and the purple energy were devouring each other. Both sides consumed and decreased at the same time. Little Ting Ting slapped away Lu Tianyi's hand that was messing with his face, then patted him on the shoulder and pointed at Yuan Tianxing. Little uncle, carry me over to touch Uncle Yuan. What? Lu Tianyi asked him curiously. Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue also looked at Little Ting Ting's face. Don't ask first, hurry up and carry me over. Ting Ting ignored him and patted his shoulder again. Lu Tianyi could only suppress his curiosity and carry him over to see what he was going to do. After being carried to Yuan Tianxing's side by Lu Tianyi, Little Ting Ting stretched out his hand and placed it on the skin of Yuan Tianxing's arm. After feeling it for a while, he retracted his hand and crossed his hands in front of his chest. I don't think this bowl is enough, but we can't continue feeding him the medicine now. We can only wait until the effect of the medicine wears off before feeding him again. Looks like we'll have to feed him the pure catnip medicine a few more times. Lin Xiao looked at the energy situation in Yuan Tianxing's body for a while and estimated the consumption of the medicine. Based on the current speed, it would only be able to offset a quarter of the purple energy in Yuan Tianxing's body by the time it was used up. So, Little Ting Ting was right. They would have to feed him the catnip medicine a few more times. It's okay as long as it works. It doesn't matter how many times. Lin Xiao breathed a sigh of relief and smiled at Little Ting Ting. After knowing that Yuan Tianxing's situation could be saved, Lin Xiao finally felt relieved. Wu Qingyue looked at her expression and knew that she not only had to worry about Lin Wenwen's situation, but she also had to worry about Yuan Tianxing's injury. On one hand, she had to pay attention to the overall situation outside the base, and on the other hand, she had to deal with Xikong Chen's schemes. However, seeing that she was so concerned about another man, Wu Qingyue felt more and more depressed in his heart. Why had he never seen her care for him so much? Tianyi, take Yuan Tianxing to the building next door and find a room for him to lie in. After confirming Yuan Tianxing's condition, Lin Xiao immediately threw him to Lu Tianyi. Lu Tianyi placed Ting Ting in her arms and carried Yuan Tianxing in a princess carry. After walking out of the living room, he walked towards the building next door. Lin Xiao looked at the remaining catnip in the bag with Little Ting Ting in her arms and revealed a slightly thoughtful expression. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Seeing Lin Xiao's expression, Wu Qingyue couldn't help but ask her. I'm thinking that this catnip might not be enough. I have to go out and ask Duan to get some more. Lin Xiao sat on the sofa and put Little Ting Ting next to her. Who are you going to bring down with you? Wu Qingyue sat on the single-seater sofa next to her, reached out and pulled Little Ting Ting to his legs and patted her hair. I'll bring the people who came with me this time. The strong ones can come with me to make up the numbers, and the weak ones can just stay in the space, Lin Xiao said after some thought. Although it was dangerous underground, the people she brought were all level 5 or 6. Moreover, the humans here were all very weak, and there were even level 3 or 4 abilities. Therefore, the weak ones could only be stored in the space first, and the strong ones could go down with them. There's one problem that I feel is a bit strange. People usually don't bring people in if they have the space. Don't normal people like to hide things? Moreover, there are so many secrets in this space. Aren't you afraid of exposing something? Wu Qingyue suddenly wanted to know what she was thinking. Although he could understand why she was confident that she wouldn't make a mistake, but what if she did? Lin Xiao shrugged and said, Why do I have to hide things? If this space is used as a storage space, I'm more willing to use it as a weapon. Moreover, in this space, I can control everyone's life and death, and I can know everyone's thoughts. Those who covet my space are already dead. Moreover, in this apocalyptic world, although there are very few spatial abilities, they aren't rare, right? What's there to hide? Moreover, I originally planned to build a zombie army in this space. Wherever I go, I can bring a zombie army with me. Isn't that a very confident thing? Chapter 1262. Lin Xiao understood what Wu Qingyue was trying to say. Normally, some people would be too cautious and not let others know that they had a space ability. After all, as long as there was a space, other people would start to covet the things inside, no matter how many things there were inside. But for others, it was a tempting trigger to commit a crime. But Lin Xiao didn't think so at all. She just wanted to make better use of this space. Since she was going to use it as a weapon, a storage cabinet, or a cultivation base, she couldn't hide it forever. It was better to make good use of it. Besides, even if the people who entered her space were stronger than her, she could still kill them. What was there for her to worry about? This space was completely under her control. If someone wanted to get the things in her space, she would be able to feel it when the other party understood the value of her space. Her ability to sense people's hearts wasn't just sitting around and not using it. So, although she wasn't worried about Wu Qinyue's thoughts, she was still on guard. Even though she was much stronger now, not everyone could enter her space. And the people she brought into the space before were also people she looked at. Anyway, if they weren't people she wanted to kill, then they would be people she saved. Your idea is very strange, but you're the only one who dares to think like this. After all, your space is very special. If others knew that you could grow things in your space, they would probably want to control you, Wu Qingyue said after some thought. Lin Xiao looked at him speechlessly. What does it matter? I brought people in because I looked at the people, okay? I'm not stupid enough to let just anyone in. There were probably 3 types of people she let in. One was to be killed, one was to be completely trusted, and the last was to be used by her. Wu Qingyue thought about it and felt that his question was a bit redundant. At this time, Lin Xiao stood up and looked at him. Okay, is it about time for you to go out? Wu Qingyue looked at the time and nodded. Yes. Then he said to the 2 children, you 2 stay here and don't cause trouble for others. The 2 children nodded in unison. Okay. Little Ting Ting tilted his head. We've always been good. Yes. You 2 have always been the best. Okay, your uncle will be here in a moment. We'll go out first. We still have something to do. Lin Xiao picked up Ting Ting and kissed him on the cheek. Then, she put him back on the sofa and stood up. Wu Qingyue also stood up and walked to the open space outside the coffee table, waiting for Lin Xiao to come over and take him out. After Lin Xiao brought him out, the 2 of them immediately split up to deal with their own matters. Wu Qingyue asked Xiao Liqing to send someone back to hasten the production of the new weapons, while Lin Xiao secretly released Xie Dong and asked him to go back and bring more catnip. Then, when the time came, he went underground to explore. With the catnip that Lin Wenwen brought back and the weapons made by Sea City, they didn't have to worry too much about dealing with the underground creatures. And it didn't take long for Meng Yu to bring news to the person Lin Wenwen asked Xiao Yunlong to send someone to find in Sea City. These people are the important managers of Sea City's top corpse hunting group. Do you know them? Meng Yu said to Lin Wenwen after giving her the information of these people. Lin Wenwen looked at their corpse hunting group, which had about 1,000 people. It was a 5-star corpse hunting group in Sea City. In particular, the people that Lin Xiao asked her to investigate, although they didn't have any positions in the base, each of them had a very high contribution value. As high as tens of thousands of points, it was difficult for others to accumulate. They have always been unwilling to officially join the official staff of Sea City Base, and even more unwilling to join the army. I feel like they are waiting for someone. Meng Yu said to her with some confusion and uncertainty. Waiting for someone? Waiting for who? Lin Wenwen looked at her with some confusion. When she came back, the end of the world had just arrived, and Dong Xinxin and the others were already very well prepared. After the base in Sea City was established, they could quickly enter the core. Lin Wenwen curiously looked at the information that Meng Yu gave her and asked, if I remember correctly, they should be the first batch to join Sea City base. After these 7 years, they should be able to live a good life in Sea City. Meng Yu sat on the chair and smiled. They are indeed living very well now, but they are unwilling to join our base. Especially this Dong Xinxin. This little girl is very mysterious. On the surface, the leaders of the corpse hunting group are these 3 men, but they seem to attach great importance to Dong Xinxin's opinion. As long as she is opposed to something, they will not do it. Even if there is a great temptation, they will not. When Lin Wenwen heard her mention Dong Xinxin's name, he just smiled. At this time, Meng Yu revealed a puzzled expression and said, if I didn't pay attention, I wouldn't know. This time, I also found some strange things about them. They seem to have lived too smoothly for the past 7 years. Everyone who had experienced these 7 years of the end of the world, there was no one who didn't experience hardships to survive. Even those with great power and status, before the establishment of the base, were in a difficult situation. Lin Wenwen said, maybe they have some special skills. Maybe they have some strange people with special powers following them. This Dong Xinxin and Dong Lijia were children of a very rich family before the end of the world. Maybe their family knows someone with special skills. Of course, she would not tell Meng Yu that Dong Xinxin had experienced 7 years of rebirth, so she found a reason to divert her attention. That's true. But why do you suddenly want to find these people? What's the matter? Meng Yu was just asking out of curiosity. That was because Lin Wenwen must have had something to discuss with these people. Lin Wenwen nodded. Yes, there is something. Meng Yu stood up. Well, since you have something to find them, I won't continue to disturb you. Thank you for helping me find information about them. Lin Wenwen also smiled and sent her out of the door, thanking her. After sending Meng Yu off, Lin Wenwen immediately went to the address given by Meng Yu. After arriving at a high-class residential area in Area A, he showed the pass given by Meng Yu. Lin Wenwen took Jiang Anan, Qin Yu, and the others directly to the location of Dong Xinxin's house. There were people guarding outside the door of Dong Xinxin's house. After seeing Lin Wenwen and the others appear, they politely stopped her. Hello, who are you looking for? Lin Wenwen smiled and said, I am looking for Dong Xinxin. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.